In a world where voices are silenced,
Please.
one man refuses to lie down.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
He's been punted not once,
40 years they've been trying.
not twice,
You couldn't fire somebody if they were horrible, doing a terrible job.
but 3 times.
You're fired.
He doesn't tell you what to think, but gives you something to think about. Welcome to the Bonafide podcast with Luke Bona. And he's not
Here we go.
done
Hold your ears, folks.
yet.
It's showtime.
Welcome to another Bonafide podcast. It is episode 124. We're getting up there. Look, as I keep saying, we're the podcast where we don't tell you what to think. I just enjoy giving you something to think about and talk about and create a bit of conversation and get some feedback. And it's imperative. It's important that we get your feedback. So leave us a voice message or drop us an email, drop us an opinion. And if you've got someone you'd like us to get on the podcast, someone you'd like to get to know a little bit better, another onion we can unpeel, we'll do our very, very best. We've got some really interesting guests coming up today in the podcast, and we've got some really interesting onions to unpeel in the future. But look, please keep the ideas coming because we love it. And remember to follow and subscribe to the show on whatever app it is you listen to. It does help us find new audiences everywhere. And just a reminder, you can watch this episode on video on Spotify and, of course, on YouTube. Coming up, we're going to talk to Trevor Long from EFTM and a bit of tech talk, and he is absolutely ranting today about the Telstra drama that unfolded last week. He says there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and the media pile-on that happened with the Telstra boss, Vicky Brady, was uncalled for. He says you can't compare that to what happened to the Optus CEO after two massive Optus stuff-ups, and I'm talking about the former Optus CEO, Kelly Bayer Rosmarin. He says two completely different stories, and what happened to Telstra needs explaining, and Trevor Long is ready to do that. We're also going to talk to Ben Downie, who is the Channel 7 correspondent in the UK. A lot going on there. What happened with Prince Harry and his family's visit to the UK? Did he make up with his father, the King? Are they now singing a royal version of Kumbaya? And Great Britain is about to get a new Prime Minister. We'll learn more about him. And why has Nigel Farage created a by-election? What's the story there? And, of course, England in the World Cup through to the quarterfinals. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Kelsey, do you know Robbie Katter?
I think we all know Robbie Katter.
Now, you know Bob Katter, his father. I don't know if you know Robbie Katter. Robbie actually is the boss of the Katter party, and he's passionate about Queensland, and he believes that the unwarranted spending, his words, not mine, on the 2036 Brisbane Olympics or Queensland Olympics is ridiculous. It's contributing to inflation beyond belief, and he thinks the money is better spent elsewhere, and he'll explain why. We'll also have Truckie Tuesday with Rod Hannifey, and I'm looking forward to talking to Tony Crook from GME, the Australian company that makes UHF radios and CBs and other essential items that every truckie and every caravaner needs, and boatie. We'll talk to him. But we'll talk about the Casino Truck Show, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. We're on the road. Well, we're on the road.
On the plane and then the road.
Well, we're on the road first, then on the plane, and then we're back on the road. And we're going to the Casino Truck Show, and
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to
And
that.
if you're going to be at the Casino Truck Show, we're going to be doing, well, not we, Luke and Rod are going to be doing a live Truckie Tuesday panel on the Saturday. So
That'll
stop
be live
by.
on the Bonafide podcast. And so that means you can ring in, can they? Will we have the
No,
phones?
if you're there, you can ask a question.
Oh, I thought maybe we could get people to...
No.
You're only bringing up the little case, not the big case.
No, it's just because it's live at the truck show. So
Okay.
you got to be at the truck show to participate.
And will you be walking around with a roving microphone? I think that.
Sure.
I think you should. Do we have a Bonafide podcast mic cover like they have on Channel 7 and Channel 9 and everything else? You need to hold the microphone up with Bonafide on it. Is it too late to make one? Make one out of cardboard. You can fashion something.
You will find something.
We will find something. But let's have a look at some of the news that's making news today. And for the third poll in a row, One Nation and Pauline Hanson has dropped, this time by 3 points. Third straight. This is the Resolve poll that came out in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Melbourne Age today. And it's interesting, Kelsey. Barnaby Joyce was on Channel 7 Sunrise this morning, and Natalie Barr put it to Barnaby from One Nation that possibly one of the reasons for the dip in the poll is Pauline Hanson's comments about multiculturalism versus monoculturalism. And we spoke to Pauline about that on this podcast. Here's a little of what Barnaby had to say on Sunrise, because I didn't quite get his answer. You ever listen?
And when she says big things like that, big sort of policy ideas, I guess, and then dips 8 points, which is significant in, I know it's only one poll, do you think that has affected her? Paid parental leave got a lot of coverage, and so did the monoculture. Has that affected her?
Well, I think that people understand that one of the big things about One Nation, one of the big things about Pauline is social cohesion and making sure that the issues, especially what we saw tragically at Bondi, are not repeated. And it requires a substantive statement. You've got to be brave enough to make it. If you don't want to make it, then I suppose you accept that it'll happen again and again and again. And each time we'll say, oh, that's terrible. No, that's not good enough. You have to say, well, we have to have a clear statement about what is appropriate in being an Australian citizen and being part of this nation, that you have to respect other people. It's not a statement about people's colour or their creed or their religion. It's a statement about how people act and a statement about the paradigm and the guardrails which you have to work within as part of that Australian culture. As I've said before, without being trite, there are many other cultures and there are sections of them which are untenable. They're tenable for that culture, but not tenable for an Australian culture.
So what do you make of that? It was a very long, don't you agree? It was a long, convoluted answer. And I don't know if he actually answered the question. Usually he's up on a mountainside in his electorate when he does these things with his hat on. He was actually in the studio this morning. And the question still remains, what is the definition of Australian culture? And has Pauline Hanson saying we don't need multiculturalism, we need monoculturalism for this country to go forward?
This is the thing, right? Me and Pauline have very different ideas on policy, right? However, I will say, especially after the whole conversation about paid parental leave, I went through the transcript, Luke, of her press conference. She didn't actually bring up paid parental leave. Her comments about the gender pay gap, they were kind of conflated to her stance on paid parental leave, but she wasn't actually speaking about paid parental leave specifically. Paid parental leave is what the media inferred from that, and then the conversation kind of rolled on from there. And then, of course, Pauline was kind of forced to make a stronger statement on paid parental leave and kind of clarify what she meant by that. And I just think that's a very good example of, kind of what Pauline says is that she says one thing, it's kind of taken out of context a little bit or misconstrued. And I don't think people realise that all this does is just fuel the fire, right? Because in a lot of ways, she's right? She is right when she says she's taken out of context. That doesn't mean that what she said in the first place isn't, a bit funny, but she's right when she says she's taken out of context. So yeah, when it comes to the monocultural thing, when she spoke to you, she said, I think she was clear that she doesn't mean like let's get rid of all the cultures and say goodbye to the Chinese takeaway down the road. I think what she was trying to say was you have to abide by Australian laws and rules regardless of what your culture is. We can't have different courts for different cultures, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that's what she was trying to say. So I think they've kind of opened a can of worms with this one though, Luke, because it is a hard thing to define, isn't it? It's a very hard thing to define, especially when Australia is such a multicultural place and we're so much better for multiculturalism as well. So I think they've opened a can of worms with this one. And if I was them, I would be in the party room, the party room, getting very clear on the definitions of these things, because we all know somebody who is a second generation Australian or is married to someone who's newly, we all know people of different cultural backgrounds and we are all better for it. And so they do need to get clear on this, I think.
I think so too. I think the other thing is, Angus Taylor has done nothing but attack Pauline Hanson, and if he wants to play ball and become Prime Minister, I think he's going to need One Nation support. And maybe I thought at first he'd read the room wrong. But one of Angus Taylor's points is a very good point. It's very easy when you're in opposition and a fringe party, and One Nation no longer a fringe party they were, to come up with all sorts of policies that grabs the attention and the imagination of the Australian public, but then you've got to cost it. And you've got to get your pencil out and you've got to say, this is how we're going to pay for things. And I think the electorate might be saying, that's fantastic what you're saying, and I agree with your enthusiasm and, and your sense of civil loyalty, but how's everything going to get paid for?
Yeah, it has to work out at the end.
Yeah, that's right. It does. So, interesting. She has slipped 3 points in the Resolve poll.
I don't believe these polls. I don't believe
They're usually pretty good. They're usually pretty good.
Really? I don't know. Until we're there on election day, you never know. These polls can
Kelsey,
go so many different ways.
That is such an old political saying. There's only one poll that matters, and that's the one on election day.
Well, it's true, though.
It is true. But they are, historically, usually pretty accurate.
Now, look, I also don't think it's just these comments about the multicultural thing that's maybe impacting these polling numbers. I'm not sure if you saw it, but there was an investigation into the One Nation Party outsourcing work to the Philippines. And I know at least a lot of the criticism around that is, you're for Australia, for Australian businesses and that type of thing.
Why are you employing people overseas?
Yeah, but, and the offshore work.
Who are cheaper?
And also, apparently, and this is just reporting, is saying that the workers were paid between $4 and $8 per hour. And these are people that are paid to essentially create Facebook pages, create social posts to kind of hype Pauline Hanson up. And there's a lot of talk around whether or not this is kind of influencing people's perceptions. But I don't know. Do we know how other parties run their social media campaigns? Is it normal for political parties to offshore some of their work? I don't actually know.
I don't know either. We need to find out.
Yeah, we do need to find out.
You've given me more work to do, and that's actually a job worth doing. Let's find out. And Senator Hanson said she'd be happy to come back on, and she also said that her daughter Lee from Tasmania, who will be running for One Nation, is happy to come on. So we'll try and get her back.
Yes, it's in the works, but they are in the UK right now, talking to none other than Tony Robinson.
Yes, I know. But I tell you what,
you got to respect that she runs headfirst into controversy. I mean,
she hasn't run away since 1996. She has not stopped. She's always been Pauline Hanson. You either like her or you don't. But I tell you what, let's put the invite to our listeners out now. Email us a question you'd like me to put to Senator Pauline Hanson, and I'll ask it. And I'll tell you what even else I'll do. Kelsey, don't judge them by the comments. Just we'll get how many questions would we have time for? 5? We'll put them in a hat. I'll bring them out of the hat and I will read them without pre-reading them. And I won't give Pauline Hanson, Senator Hanson, a heads up as to what the question is either. And your question could very well be put to Senator Hanson next time we get her on. So email us your questions. Please keep it brief. Don't send us a short story. Send us a question you'd like me to put to Senator Pauline Hanson, and I will do it.
community@bonafidepod.com.
Yeah, that's the new one. I keep forgetting it. I need to push it into my brain. I've got so much other stuff.
You're so busy. It's life.
What's this story? What's this story out of Queensland? That children are now being allowed to perform almost naked in Queensland licensed venues, even at events that are advertised adults only, 18 plus. Under the liquor licensing laws, there's a loophole. There was an investigation, Millennial, by the Sunday Mail, and it uncovered photos and videos of a child performing alongside adults at multiple venues across the state, including well-known bars and clubs. A complaint about those performances was made to the Office of Liquor and Gaming Regulation and the Attorney General and the Justice Minister, Deb Frecklington, claiming they were erotic and sexualised. What do you make of this?
I don't know what to make of this. What is going on? Does remind me, though, of I was reading an article into child exploitation material and how it ends up online. It was the figure, don't quote me on this, but it was like 85% of child exploitation material is actually taken from regular old Facebook pages, right? It's taken from mum and dad posting photos of their kid. They just think it's going out to their friends, right? Maybe their kid's wearing a bikini or, what these bad actors do is that they take these seemingly innocent photos. Some of them get churned up into AI generated slop and ends up being like proper child pornography. But what shocked me was that the source material that these bad actors are using are Facebook pages, Instagram pages from mum and dad who probably have no idea that their photos are being ripped off and put online. And that's why there is a big push by social media advocates saying, do not put your children online. I don't know. I don't understand why this would be law, or I don't know. Just imagine if a bad actor was at one of these clubs taking their own videos, you know?
Well, I didn't think anyone under 18 was allowed in a licensed venue. But
No, what's up with that?
yeah, but up at the tavern up the road here, it's a licensed venue, and yet the restaurant is family friendly, and you have young kids sitting at tables where they pour beers and cocktails.
Surely this has to be something. Something has to be done about this.
Now, here's a story, and I may not make many friends here, especially from you again.
Why?
Well, there's a Sydney cafe owner labelled Super Stressed who has slammed the Prime Minister for abandoning small businesses. This cafe owner says the businesses are being driven to the brink amid the soaring cost of a living crisis. Roastville Coffee Roasters owner Destiny Kutis, based in Marrickville in Sydney, in the heart of the Prime Minister's electorate, was so frustrated she wrote to him personally last year inviting him to sit down to discuss how small businesses were struggling, and he didn't show up. She said, I was very frustrated. I asked where the reprieves and incentives were for small businesses. She said, we are being squeezed in every direction. Let me just go on. She says, the pressure is now forcing Roastville to lift prices by 5%, a move Ms. Kutis fears could drive customers away at the worst possible time. Now, this is what she says that gets me. She says, coffee has become a luxury rather than a necessity. We are scared that we are going to scare some people away because we are already feeling the pinch. Well, the price of coffee has gone up.
It's so expensive.
But here's what gets me. Coffee has become a luxury rather than a necessity. Coffee's not a necessity. It is a bloody luxury.
Yeah.
If you want to go and have a barista-poured latte almond thingo with extra foam, that's a bloody luxury. Make a cup of Nescafe at home and put it in your own cup. If you want to go and have a barista-poured coffee, I'm sorry, that's a bloody luxury. How can she put... This is what gets me.
Yeah.
I feel for small businesses. Don't worry, I was one. And over 90% of Australian GDP comes from small businesses. I get that, but don't try and bleed all over us by saying, oh, he's made coffee a luxury, not a necessity. Hello? It is a luxury.
Yeah, poor...
Coffee is not a necessity.
Hey, we'll put a poll up. I'm
going to annoy a lot of people, but I don't give a rat's. I don't give a rat's. If you want to go and get your little cardboard cup and have it all foamy and nice with a little design on the top and possibly even a marshmallow and your hot chocolate, well, I'm sorry, that's a bloody luxury. Make your coffee at home. People have coffee makers.
Yeah. Well,
Make your coffee at home and put it in your own cup. Oh, strike me pink. She had me all the way through. I thought, yes, small businesses are definitely being neglected. But don't try and tell me that coffee is a necessity.
Yeah.
Strike me pink. Are you with me on this?
I'm definitely with you around... It's just a fact. It's not you don't need coffee to live.
You
right?
text me all the time and you say, I'll be over in an hour, and you put in your coffee order. I know yours. You used to have an almond latte with 1 sugar. Mm-hmm. Now you're onto a normal latte with vanilla. And Nathan has a tall ice black with 1 sugar. See, I know your order.
Look, I've got my own homemade coffee right here.
Yes. Oh, hang on. Look at the cup. Hang on. Show people the cup.
No, Mum got mad at you for buying too many coffees. So now we make them at home.
Well, they were $6 each.
Yeah, that's so expensive. Yeah, I think wrong choice of words here, but I mean the message behind it is still true.
But can I just say this, because your mother doesn't listen to the podcast. If you text me next time you're coming over, I'll still get you a coffee because I love you. Because you put in a lot of work and you're worth an almond latte foam thing with vanilla almond milk. She wants almond milk. What's this almond milk? And so, do you know what? I reckon God is looking down at the human race, especially rich Westerners that can afford barista-made coffees. Mm. And God is going, what a funny mob. What was I doing? Saying I gave these people some really good mammals to get milk from, and cows are at the top of the list. You can go to goats, you can go to camels, you can go almost anything. But I gave them cows. And now they're trying to get milk out of an almond.
Yeah.
They're trying to get.
Hey, it's delicious.
They're trying to get milk out of a bean.
It's not a bean, it's a nut.
I gave them cows. What was I thinking? Oh, Stripey Pink. He must be shaking his head.
Probably.
That is, of course, if God is a he. It could be. I saw a very funny piece of graffiti many years ago, and it said, "I've seen God, and she's black."
Oh, there you go.
And there was another good piece of graffiti back in the day too. "My mother made me a lesbian." And someone wrote underneath it, "Could she nip me one too?"
Look, I worked in cafes for...
Hang on.
Oh, my...
I'm an ideas man. If you've seen some great graffiti, a witty line on the back of a toilet door on a wall, take a photo and send it to us. I want to see Australia's wittiest graffiti.
There was that dude in Melbourne that was graffitiing that bird everywhere. He got caught. He got arrested.
There was a sign, there was a thing that said, "Bill Posters will be prosecuted." And someone wrote underneath, "Bill Posters is innocent."
I worked in cafes for a long time, and
You learned how to do fancy designs on the top?
Yeah, understanding like the coffee process, and I was managing cafes. Coffee is probably the one thing where cafes can make the most money on. They do have quite a big margin. What's probably happening is that the price of everything else is going up, right? Rent, produce, all of these
Cost
things.
of living,
Cost
inflation.
of living. And
it's
so
called inflation, which is brought about by overspending.
Well, not really. That's what they want you to.
What,
that's
so
really
all-
what
all
they
the
want.
econ-
They
all
want
the
you to.
economists are wrong, are they?
No. It's obviously brought in by consumer spending, but the massive
And government
drivers
spending.
of inflation is government spending, and also house
mean?
prices as well, the real estate market,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
which the ordinary person actually has no control over. Which is why I hate it when Michelle Bullock gets up and is like, "You guys are spending too much," because it's like, bro, we're not controlling inflation here. The bloody investors and the people that have bajillions of dollars, they're the ones that are impacting inflation the most. Don't come on here and get mad at me for buying my freaking avocado toast. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that coffee is the one thing that goes up the first because it's the easiest thing to make money off. But it is indicative of a bigger problem, which is that obviously it's getting too expensive to run a business.
Okay, the other reason, and this is worldwide, there were massive crop failures in Brazil and Vietnam, and it put the cost of coffee up unbelievably. So the climate, weather, it's the same thing with chocolate.
Yeah.
That was weather. A lot of it to do with weather. But you're right, the cost of living. How come Michelle Bullock is bro and not sis? Why you call everyone bro? Why did you call her bro?
I don't know.
She'd be sis, wouldn't she?
No, she's a bro. Now, Luke, just moving on, this to me is something out of a scary movie.
A man has survived being sucked head first out of a plane window after an engine explosion shattered the glass. Nearby passengers, including the man's wife, successfully held onto him before the Ryanair plane made an emergency landing in Greece.
A plane window was smashed, sucked out, whatever, not attached properly. And this guy was hanging head first out of a bloody aeroplane window. Is that not nightmare fuel?
It is absolutely frightening. When I saw the headline, "Man sucked off in a plane," I thought, how many clicks is that going to get? But he sucked out of a plane. He was sucked out. That is your worst nightmare.
I know.
That is his head and Kelsey, his head and shoulders were outside the plane.
Oh, yeah. I feel sorry for all the psychologists that are, helping people with like the fear of flying, because you're done for after reading this. You're not getting on a plane if you think of this. How does this happen though? How do they not attach a window properly?
Well, it was Ryanair. It's a budget airline.
Yeah, it is.
Whenever we travel, your mum always wants the window seat. Guess what?
What?
She can have it.
Yeah, she can. Yeah.
Nikki, it's all yours.
Now, Luke, this is a really scary story, and I feel like we are going to be hearing a lot more of this as time goes on. We obviously don't know a whole bunch of details now, but a 32-year-old woman in Woy Woy, she has been accused of cannibalism. She walked into the police station and she disclosed that she had murdered her 4-year-old son, and allegedly parts of her son, his arm, was cannibalized.
We need to put a warning on.
I know. Now, obviously, this has, I think this happened last week. Details are only starting to emerge. And obviously, because this is a highly sensitive case, a lot of these details are being, selectively released. The last time that there was a case of cannibalism in Australia was 1988, when David William Phillip, a paranoid schizophrenic man, murdered a Korean man man before cooking parts of his thigh and eating them. Now, this woman has had, it's known that she was suffering from mental illness, and the social services had been called on her apparently 3 times before. Yeah, tragic case here, and I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot more about this because it's shocking. It's shocking. How does this happen?
I don't like any part of that story. Kelsey, can we change the subject? Can we talk about something a little happier?
We absolutely can.
Please,
and that is
for balance.
That is coming in the form of Neil the Seal. He has left Tasmania. He usually comes into Hobart and he hates public infrastructure more than anybody else known to this earth.
Neil the Seal? Never heard. Who's Neil the Seal?
What do you mean?
I don't know Neil the Seal.
Neil the Seal is an elephant seal, right? He comes on to Hobart Beach once a year to do his molting. And I'm pretty sure this is the 3rd year that he's been. So when he first came...
Turtles don't molt.
Seals, yes, they do.
Oh, seals. Did they molt?
Yeah, they shed. They shed their outer...
They shed their... like snakes. Do they?
Yeah, before they go back, right? And Neil the Seal is known for his burning hatred of public infrastructure, right? Yeah. But he is a massive seal, right? He's an elephant seal, and he tears up the town, and he's become a bit of a tourist attraction, right? Yeah. And he comes, he molts, and then he leaves again. And he has just left Tasmania, but these are some unhinged photos of Neil the Seal, right? On his last trip. And I thought, let's have a look through them, and you can describe them for the listeners. Look how cute he is.
He's a big fat slug.
He's cute as. Now,
How many chins has he got?
This is an example of Neil the Seal tearing up public infrastructure.
I remember seeing Neil the Seal. He tears things away.
Yeah, and he gets bigger every year he comes back, right? Look at him. Now, this is my favourite photo. This is a photo of Neil. He looks bloody angry.
What's he saying there?
He's saying, "Don't talk to me before 8 o'clock in the morning."
Yeah, it's you.
That's me. I relate to this a lot. Look at him. Look at the absolute destruction he's left behind him. He's... What do you call them? Bollards. There's 5 bollards, and you can tell that he's just one by one taking them down. And you see around his face, Luke, that's him molting. He lives the best life. Look at him.
Yeah, he's knocking everything over.
He's knocking everything over, but that's what they do. Look at him. He's so bloody cute.
He's massive.
He's massive, and he's only going to keep getting bigger.
Do you know what his favourite song is?
What?
Kiss from a Rose.
Baby, I can see you from a kiss from... Why?
Google.
Oh, Seal. Yeah. Haha.
Oh, bro.
Just some quick listener mail today, Luke. I put up a poll on our last episode. I asked, Australia's illegal tobacco trade is booming. What actually fixes it, Luke? Yep. Over 106 people voted on YouTube. 84% of people have said, cut the excise and kill the black market. So I think we're all in agreement here. 2% of people said keep prices high, it deters smoking. 6% said ban the addictive ingredient, not the product. And 8% said it's an enforcement problem, not a price problem.
Yeah, but kill the excise, 84%.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong result about how we're feeling about that. Now, we also had one user leaving a comment. They said, want more apprentices? Easy. Pay higher wages and encourage adults to enter a trade. Stop pushing uni just because it makes money, because it puts out high numbers of unemployable people.
Yeah, well, if you want someone without any experience and no skills, but someone who wants to learn, if you want to pay them full wages, you're going to struggle. So once again, the government's going to have to say, okay, well, you take on an apprentice and we'll give you subsidies. We'll give you tax breaks. We'll do all that. Because no tradie is going to take on an apprentice, pay them full wages while they're learning.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's true. But I understand what the listener's saying.
Yeah. I was with my friend who is a builder on the weekend, and I asked him about the email we got from, I can't remember his name, but he had a son. I think his son's name was Ben. And he had done his apprenticeship, and then his boss told him he needed to get an ABN, and essentially, then he was getting paid nothing. I asked my friend about this, who is also a builder, and he said it's a massive problem. He said all the big companies, the big franchise building companies, they're essentially run by apprentices. And as soon as those apprentices finish their apprenticeship, they're essentially pushed out, and then a new bunch of apprentices comes through.
Yep.
So it's a huge problem. Okay.
So the deal is, if you have an apprentice, you get a massive subsidy or a massive tax break or both, But the deal is you've got to keep them on for 5 years.
Yeah, and you can't make them get an ABN if they don't want to.
No,
you know?
exactly.
Now,
exactly. I bet. See, we've solved one of the problems here.
Yeah, done.
The housing shortage fixed.
Done.
On the Bonafide podcast. Yep.
Now, Brent left us this comment. He says, Luke, open your other eye. Melbourne is obviously better than Sydney. It was number one in the world for 7 years straight until COVID hit. Also, you have more rain than we do, so don't talk crappy weather. Pot calling kettle black, mate.
Mate.
Sucked in.
Brent, this is where you let yourself down. Melbourne is great for lots and lots of things. Lots of things. Sporting capital of the world, I've given you that. Great restaurants, theatre, a sense of sophistication. But Brent, you haven't lived in Sydney. Next. Do you know what? I think it might have been Paul Keating. Don't quote me. I think it was Paul Keating who said, if you don't live in Sydney, you're just camping out. Coming up on Bonafide podcast number 124, Tech Talk with Trevor Long and the truth behind the Telstra outage. Well, it's been a while since we've had Trevor Long from EFTM, Everything for the Man, on the Bonafide podcast. He's been very, very busy, but what a great time to have him now because he has been very, very vocal over the Telstra outage. Now, my listeners and viewers would know I was on Channel 7 Sunrise last Friday. I was on Channel 7 Sunrise recently, and we were talking about the massive pile-on that was happening with the Telstra CEO, Vicky Brady, who was overseas on a family holiday, which I think she's entitled to have when this all fell over. She got the first plane back and she fronted the media last Friday morning. Now, it brought back memories to me of the Optus outage, and there were two of them. One was in 2022, September 2. Trevor Long rang me on Triple M at about 20 to 5. And said, mate, there's a problem, I'm onto it. That was massive. And that was a huge security breach where thousands and thousands of Optus customers' personal details have been hacked. And then there was another one last year, another outage, and then there were inquiries into those two disasters and the fact that people couldn't get through to 000. There were reports that people had died as a direct result of the Optus outage. And then the South Australian Police last week having an inquiry into allegedly somebody not being able to get through to 000 and passing away as well, which is tragic if that's the case. But Trevor Long from EFTM has been following this very, very carefully. And when I think back to the Optus outage and you talk about CEO pylons, Trevor, the then Optus CEO, Kelly Bayer Rasmussen, was punted, and there were calls for Vicky Brady, the CEO of Telstra, to also get the punt. Can you give us some background into all of this?
I mean, it's a level of insanity in journalism that, look, it stems from clickbait. Look, that's what it is. There's a requirement these days that you create content and headlines that get people clicking. I get it. You got to get traffic. You want people to read your stuff. That's how you make money. That's how you become the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 news outlet on the web. But the thing is, let's reflect on Kelly Bayer Rasmussen, because I was quite vocal in calling for her to be sacked or resign. But that was after the second outage. So they had the data breach, and then they had a national outage. And that's before last year's 000 one. That's a different one altogether. Under Kelly Bayer Rasmussen, they had 2 major outages. And I was calling for her head because of the way they were handling it from a customer perspective. Customer communication, customer care, customer outreach, just general customer communications was appalling. And that's why I felt that she had to go, because that kind of thing, you lead from the top. At the time, internally, I was deemed to be a sexist because I was calling for her to be sacked. I didn't give a rat's whether it was a bloke or a woman. They handled it poorly. They needed to go, right? So that was my view at the time. Last year, under Stephen Roux at Optus, they had a major outage in Western Australia and part of South Australia, and they had the 000 effects. No, I wasn't calling for Stephen Roux to resign because he stood up on day one of the afternoon and then every day since, communicating on the issue. So, look, as much as you got to blame the CEO for the dramas, they didn't cause them. They're just there to handle them. And in this instance, the fact that, and I did a video late last week because I don't read the Daily Mail, but it came up in my Facebook kind of feed, a big headline. It was like, Telstra's CEO on holidays during out. I'm like, yeah, Who gives a shit? She's on holidays. Everyone's entitled. Like, if you've spoken to Americans, they're blown away that we have annual leave. Yeah? We get 4 to 5 weeks annual leave a year. That's an entitlement of Australians. And the CEO, despite the fact she earns $6 million, she's still entitled to a few weeks away with her family. She is on the other side of the world, and I can't work out yet where she was, and I'm sure someone will work out where she was, what time it went down, what plane she could have gotten but didn't. You know, there'll be all this drama, I'm sure, at some point.
There was lots of debate at Channel 7 saying, couldn't she have got a private plane? Couldn't she?
The fact is, she found, I'll take you into the bunker. Let's go into Telstra's bunker, okay?
Right.
Shit goes down at 4:30. Some lights start going off in the network operations center going, something's wrong, okay? So it's, let's start dealing with those problems. Let's start fixing those problems. Should you call CEO? No, what are you talking about? There's like 5 things that have got a problem. Calm down. There's 50,000 of them across the country. Calm down. So they start fixing them. They start working on them. By 6:30, hang on a minute, we're not really getting a grasp on this, so it gets escalated. It's another level. They have, as I understand it, at least 3 levels of escalation, concern, severity.
DEFCON 1, DEFCON 2, DEFCON 3.
I believe they're severity levels, right? So this gets to severity level 3. That's called the CEO territory. So someone calls the CEO. She goes, oh, shit, I'm in the Maldives or wherever the hell she is. And she goes, rightio, no worries, give me a briefing, run through it. So let's say they spend an hour on the phone talking about it. So it's now, 7:30, 8:30. She said it was evening her time. So in my book, she's somewhere between New York and Europe. I don't know, somewhere there. And so she now has to work out how to get home. Now, remember, this is Wednesday morning. She arrives home Friday morning. Now, I've flown from the States enough to know that if she arrived home on Friday morning, that means she left, LA 12 hours earlier, so Thursday night, which means she left wherever she was on the East Coast, Thursday lunchtime. So we're talking 12 hours to pack your bags, organise travel. She's turned it around pretty quickly. But the bottom line was when Michael Ackland, the CFO, stood up and talked about this, he said the CEO's on leave and I have full delegation. And for people that haven't worked in business, delegation means responsibilities are passed on to you. In a business, it's often, the CEO has unlimited delegation financially. She can sign off on anything. And the CFO might have, $3 million delegation on a normal day. When you're acting as the CEO, you've got that unlimited delegation. So he's got delegation to act as the CEO in the same way that an acting prime minister is the prime minister when the prime minister's on leave. Now, the fact is, they said from the first day, halfway through the first day of this, they said she's on her way home. Well, I don't know why anyone would write anything about Vicky being on holidays after that point, because as soon as she got home, she basically got to the office, refreshed herself, and had a briefing and stood up and did a press conference. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good outcome.
So it was a complete unnecessary pile-on.
For sure.
You can't compare the Vicky Brady pile-on to that of Optus CEO Kelly
I don't
Bayer
think so,
Ross-
because
Ross
Kelly
Mallard.
Bayer Rosmar, and it was weeks or days into the outage that we were calling for that because of the handling of the issue, right? And that goes also to the reporting of this. Look, the Optus issue last year, September last year, was terrible because what happened was their network went down and their network or their users' phones were confused to think the network was up, which is why 000 failed. So when your phone is on the Vodafone network and Vodafone's down, it should use Optus or Telstra to call 000. That's how it works. It's called camping on. Your phone camps on to another network and makes the 000 call. In the Optus outage, really simplifying it here, the network was down, but the phone thought it was up. So it didn't try and camp onto Telstra or Vodafone. It just kept trying Optus, and it failed, right? In the Telstra issue, there is, I don't believe there are many, if any, instances where the phones didn't camp on. But what we found out was that over 600 people tried to call 000 in the first day. And what happens was that when you call 000 and don't finish the call, so don't get through, the telcos are required to contact you and say, is everything all right?
Yes.
Right? And so they do these wellness checks. Now, of the 600 people, I'm going to make a wild guess that 200 of them were just nufties going, is 000 working? Like the idiotic shadow communications minister, idiot, she calls 000 to see if it's working. By the way, that's illegal. It's an offence to call 000 if it's not an emergency, right? So first and foremost. So if 200 of the people that tried to call 000 and failed were just idiots trying to test it, then let's discount those. Then there was a bunch of people who called 000. And what happens when you call 000 and your network is down, and people don't know this, Luke, this is really important learning for everyone. If you call 000 and your phone says SOS,
Yes.
000, wait, hold the phone. Do not think it's broken. It will be dead silent for 60 to 90 seconds. It could take for your phone to go, right, I'm going to find a way through. I'm going to find a way through. I'm going to find a way through. I've got the Vodafone network. I'm going to call now. So it takes time. And so I believe, and again, pure estimate, another 200 of the 600 simply didn't wait. And that's understandable because it's an emergency and you think it's not working. So in all of that, Telstra made all of the welfare checks. They checked on everyone. And then some, I really want to use the strongest possible words here, but some absolute idiot senator in South Australia gets on Facebook and says, I've got reports of someone dying.
Yes.
Because they couldn't call 000. Every Australian's right to call 000.
Yeah.
Okay, love. That's a wild thing to put on Facebook when the South Australian police don't even know about it. And then 24 hours later, what happens? South Australian police come out and go, we are aware of a death that was not related to the Telstra outage. However, the husband, the partner of the lady who has unfortunately passed, this is, I'm summarising here, he didn't call 000, he called his neighbour.
Yes.
And she's a medical professional. She came round and went, holy shit, called 000. She called 000 on her phone, and then an ambulance came and they took her to the hospital. While they were in hospital, now I don't know whether the lady had passed yet or she was just being treated, whatever, but he's at the hospital. Now he's obviously, distraught. Traumatised. Do you know what fails on him? His Telstra phone. He can't call his mum or his sister or whatever. So several calls fail. He can't make some calls to let his family know, maybe their kids, I don't know who they are, but he's trying to call people, not 000, and those calls fail. That is outrageous. That is on Telstra. That is something that he will have to live with for the rest of his life, and so will Vicky Brady, that guy couldn't call his family to let them know what was going on. That's horrible, but it was not a failure of the 000 system in any way, shape or form. And again, it was widely reported and wildly reported. And, mate, that's a massive problem for these issues because every time a telco goes down, we're thinking, is 000 broken? Mate, 000 is broken because it was created in the 1960s, okay? We've since turned off 2G and 3G and analogue phones. What have we done as a government to make 000 better and more modern? Look, I should be able to WhatsApp the emergency services. I should be able to send a Facebook message to 000. I should be able to use FaceTime to call 000. Did you know that 000 can't even get your location directly from your phone's GPS when you call them? That is outrageous. We have pinpoint accuracy about where we're standing and they don't know where we are.
Does 911 in America do everything you're saying?
Not everything, no. But there are some emergency jurisdictions around the world where they have things like detecting the location of the phone and just little things like that. There's some apps that are used for this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying you should be able to use WhatsApp to call or text 000.
Makes sense, though.
But I think you should be able to send a text. I think you should be able to use other messages. I think every Australian should have the option of installing an app that is 000, and that app gives you everything you need to know. I think every Australian with an iPhone 13 or later or a Samsung Galaxy S24 or later should be able to use satellite services to call 000. They exist. They're out there. Why aren't we using them? This is what the government needs to work on. They need to go, listen, this Telstra thing's shit, okay, and it wasn't good. But let's not labour the point of what happened a week ago. Let's labour the point of what's going to happen in the future. Let's make this better. Let's invest 10, 20, $30 million in making our 000 system the most advanced and modern emergency services system in the world because it's fine. There's a call centre. There's a room full of people who take 000 calls. They're doing a great job. They're ready. They're ready to take your emergency message, I think, whatever way it comes. They don't care if it's a call, a text, a message, whatever. We just need a process of handling that, and we need the government to put that in place urgently.
Wow, I'm digesting everything you've said here. So, first of all, you've got the Shadow Minister for Communications hearing that 000 doesn't work, so what does she do? She tries 000, and it's not an emergency call. Some people might argue she's the Shadow Minister for Communications and she wants to find out for herself if what
and
she's
that is what her
true.
staff say. That is what her staff say. But you know what? it doesn't matter. No one is meant to call 000 unless it's an emergency. I don't care who you are.
Okay. Second thing, I've had to write this down. If you ring 000 and you get SOS, it doesn't mean it's failed. It means hang on.
That's right.
Even if you've got silence, because it's trying to reroute your call.
Yep. I'd like every person.
I didn't know that. We need to be taught that. I didn't know that till just now.
I've been saying this for a long time. We need an education. Yeah, exactly. An education campaign.
Wow.
That says, guys, we all know it. Like it needs to be a piss take, basically. Get a comedian to go, guys, networks fail. Doesn't matter who it is, your network might fail. And in the case that your network fails and your phone says SOS, don't worry. You can still call 000, but please be patient. Now, that's a hard message to give, Luke, because if my child has fallen downstairs and has a leg that's, pushed out the wrong way and I'm freaking out, my wife's crying, there's blood, who knows? You don't want to wait. Like, what are we doing? But you need to have a minute level of patience that says if your phone says SOS, and you call 000, wait. Let it call, let it connect. It could take up to 60 or to 90 seconds.
That is the lesson for the day, Trevor. You could have, right here, saved lives. The other thing is the South Australian death story. 000 did not fail the partner of that.
He didn't try to call 000.
He called the neighbour who was a medical practitioner. She's then rung 000, and it worked.
And you know what?
He couldn't get through to family and friends at the hospital. I see.
I may need to be corrected, but I think the report goes that she called 000 on a Telstra phone, the neighbour.
Wow.
So it didn't fail at all. But, it's tragic that someone died and that there was, as I said, the fact that he couldn't call family on his phone is disgraceful. And that's horrible. And Telstra need to, live with that. But 000 didn't fail.
Unbelievable. And then you're making a very good point. Why is 000 just phone calls on a network? Why can't it be WhatsApp, FaceTime, text as well?
And the reason for that is in nearly every instance of an outage, you've still got some form of connectivity. So if I was a Telstra customer and this happened, I was at work, so I had my NBN connection. Very rare that, everything's going to go down on you. But, there might be an occasion, there might have been someone that was affected that way. But broadly, you can go somewhere to get connectivity. So you got Wi-Fi, you've got a phone you can hotspot off or whatever it might be, or calls might be down and data might not be. There's a bunch of reasons why data is a better mechanism than voice is. But the bottom line is we've got Wi-Fi at home, we've got Wi-Fi at the office. We should be able to use it if the networks are down to make 000 communication. And I think we urgently need that system. And by the way, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take a lot of logistical planning. It's going to take a lot of resources. But if we're not talking about it now, we're going to be talking about another Telstra or Optus or Vodafone outage in 12 months, and we're going to go, what have we done about it? Nothing.
Will the Telstra CEO survive all this?
Yeah, she'll be fine. Because, see, and I'll tell you another thing, their head of communications, their main comms guy, was also on holidays. He flew in on Wednesday morning, so the outage happened at 4:30 in the morning. He's on the plane landing at, let's say, 9 a.m. He's landing. At 7 a.m. he turns his phone on the phone and just bing, 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 bing. Could you imagine coming home from a family holiday and going, babe, just so you're not going to go straight back to work, the world's ending, like not fun, but, it is the way it is. Look, Telstra will front the government later this week, I think, because there was already a planned 000 inquiry in the Senate. And they'll have minute by minute. Optus had a 30-page minute by minute breakdown of everything that happened during their outage or their 000 woes last year. Telstra will have the same, and it'll show everything they need to show. It'll show that they handle it as best you could. But that's the thing. Did they handle this poorly? I've got no evidence they did. Should it have happened in the first case? Probably not. Should they have bought new hardware to replace the stuff that failed, 10 years ago? Maybe. I don't know. That's for another day. But in broad, simple CEO handling this, I think they'll be okay. She'll be okay.
Trevor, good to see you. Good to talk to you. Thank you for that. I did see your post on Facebook to the EFTM post, and you were, well, what's the word? You were outraged.
Yeah.
You were
It's funny, Lukey boy. You make content, I make videos all the time, whether it's about a car or a phone or whatever it is. And, it's great when you get comments and engagement and stuff. But, I've not had more people click follow than in the last week because you get fired up. I think also using a bit of language, I'll tell you what's bullshit, People are like, this is real. Like, oh, my God, what's going on? So it was a different content. But you know what? I think you've got to call this stuff out when it happens. So that's why I was pretty passionate about it. Yeah.
Stay passionate, my friend. Stay
Always.
passionate. Good to talk to you, mate. Thank you so much. EFTM, everything for the man. There it is behind him if you're watching this. Trevor Long. We'll talk again very, very soon about gadgets and other fun stuff, eh?
Cheers, buddy.
Well, as we all know by now, the human headline, Derryn Hinch, has passed away. And not a surprise to a lot of people, his health wasn't great. He had a liver transplant some years ago, which saved his life. His health had been failing for quite some time, but his energy and his passion never ever stopped. Now, Derryn Hinch was an enigma. He was a media enigma. He mastered the art of print. He was an amazing print journalist, but then went to radio, where he enjoyed great success and sometimes not so much. And he also had great success on television with the Derryn Hinch Show, Hinch, which started on Channel 7 and then went to Channel 10, but he was on 3AW, he was on radio in Perth, he was on radio in Adelaide, he was on radio on 2GB in Sydney. He was sacked so many times, he used to joke that he and Santa Claus had one thing in common, that every December they'd be looking for a new job. But the human headline also said that, to be fair, and he said, I'll take a page from the French philosopher Voltaire. Hinch swore by the journalistic mantra that all history owes the dead is truth. So let's find out some more about the ups and downs and the truths behind the legend that is Derryn Hinch, a bloke that I've known since the year 1978, and we've had him on the Bonafide podcast before, is the amazing Craig Willis. Now, Craig has known Derryn Hinch for 42 years and, in fact, helped him produce and present his radio program on 3AW. And Craig knows more about Derryn Hinch than anyone else I know, so he's been very gracious. Craig Willis, thank you so much for coming back on the Bonafide podcast. You missed the boner.
Hello, Luke. It's always a great pleasure to have a chat with you, old friend.
Well, Craig, I've known you for a long, long time, and you've known Derryn Hinch for 42 years. And I know you admired him. I know that you looked at his downcomings, but he really did make an incredible impression on Australian media, newspapers, radio, television, and everything in between. 42 years you've known Derryn. Tell us about that relationship, that friendship.
Well, the interesting thing was, Luke, that I was working in Melbourne radio after I worked with you back in the old days of 2GB. And I was enticed over to 3AW, the talk station, to be his anchor man. Basically, Derryn said, I'm a journalist, I don't do the time and I don't read commercials. So yes. He had, it's a terrible impersonation, I know, but he had a fellow, Barry Scanlon, who was moving into the production side of things at the radio station. So they were looking for a new person to sit there going, 25 to 9, what the papers say, Derryn, and do the live commercial reads. Yeah. Generally, if you like, coordinate the program on air, where we had dear friend Darren James as the panel operator, and Paul Barber, the late Paul Barber, as the producer, Pamela Graham, Susie Yeager, all working out in the control room. But I was the one that sat with him in the studio, and I'd never really met him. And I turned up for work on a Monday, and went upstairs. He had sort of a loft-type office in the old building in Melbourne in Latrobe Street, and walked in and said, I'm Craig Willis. He said, nice to meet you. Show me a man with a good voice and I'll show you a dickhead. And that was the first greeting. And Luke, I kid you not, I've actually got a reference from him which says that, but I kid you not, in that time, we went downstairs. We were on air at 8:30 and finished at midday. That went on for 5 years.
Wow.
We never had a crossword in that time.
Wow.
But he was turning 40 on the, I can't remember the exact day, but in February. So I started with him in the January. So the next thing you know, of course, he's got his 40th birthday at the famous, or should I say infamous, Underground nightclub in Melbourne, which was owned by Brian Goldsmith, father of Totty.
Right.
And he turned up in a dinner suit for his 40th with his then wife, Jackie Weaver.
Twice his wife. Yeah. We'll get to that.
And 500 of his dearest friends. And, of course, it was a weeknight, so he was on air the next morning. Mm-hmm. And I left probably around midnight thinking, Well, I've got to be in the studio by, normally around about 6-ish. On air at 8:30. I used to go up and select some music in case we needed it, do all that. So I walked into the office at 6 o'clock, and there he was, still at his desk, in his dinner suit.
Oh, no.
And I looked at him, and his eyes were like 2 touring maps of Austria. And I thought, oh, this will be good. He went on air at 8:30. You wouldn't have known he'd had a huge night. I don't think he'd been to bed. And at midday, he went to lunch at the Flower Drum, the famous Chinese restaurant in Chinatown in Melbourne.
He backed up for lunch.
He was, look, there's a great word, Luke, indefatigable.
Great word.
That is one of the great words. Discombobulated is another one, but indefatigable, in that's what he was like. He played hard. But, look, it was, going back to on a serious note, quite a shock when I found out a couple of texts from dear friends to say that he had passed away, so...
Well, yeah. I'm amazed you were surprised because he was in terrible health and a lot of it was self-inflicted and he admitted that.
Well, he did. But, Luke, I spoke to him 10 days ago. Donna and I were at the farm. I rang him, as I often did. Something would crop up and I'd ring him and say, this, that and the other. And he said to me, I've never felt better. He said, really feeling good. He was back walking.
Right.
He had a walker thing that he called Johnny Walker. And he was back doing his Goya walks, get off your ass walks, and noting how many steps he'd done. He had a pedometer. That's why I think it was probably more of a shock. That I knew he'd been in and out of hospital having treatment for the infections in his legs. But, look, it's always, 82, good innings. But still always a bit of a surprise. Okay, bit of a shock.
It's amazing because he was an incredible newspaper journalist. And in fact, I think he was in the United States when they launched the Apollo 11.
He covered the launch of that down at, as we knew it in those days, Cape Canaveral. He lived in New York for, I think, just over 10 years, working as a foreign correspondent there. He was a member of the Foreign Correspondents Club in New York. We're very proud of his heritage and his working time over there in New York. But of course, he was back here as editor of the Herald
and the Sun.
The Sun. I'm sorry, the Sun, and moved into radio in Melbourne at 3XY initially, and then came over to 3AW where I started work with him.
Well, 3AW was perfect for him, and he was very Melbourne. And I remember when 2GB, our old station, lured him onto their morning program, and Derryn Hinch eventually took over the midday show from Ray Martin, but he went on Ray Martin when he was, it was announced he was going to 2GB, and he said, I'm going to get Laws. And I remember thinking, don't say that, because Lawsy owns Sydney, you own Melbourne, you can't. And I don't know why he did it, but anyway, he waved that red flag. And
well, look, he had a thing about Laws for some strange reason, and as you know, I worked with John at 2GB, and I was his office boy at 2UW going back to 365
Kent Street, yeah.
But Derryn had a name for him. He used to call him the pockmark Prince of Pain. And I said to Derryn one day, quite seriously, that's a little rough because John Laws had polio. When he was a young man, and often scars can result from polio, and I think that's a bit tough. Oh, I don't care. That was the reaction I'd got. So he really didn't give us a rat's backside about what he said about people at times. Sometimes I used to think he was a bit tough.
He was, and he was called the human headline, and he got plenty of them, and a lot of them were about himself. But I mean, he also stood by incredible principles. I mean, let's just remember, he was an Australian Victorian senator. And because of sexual abuse that he'd experienced as a child, that was his main thing. And God bless him for making a stance, but he went to jail for it. I mean, he committed contempt of court, which is a criminal offence. And instead of paying a fine, he went to jail. When he named that pedophile priest, Michael Charles Glennon. And he went to jail for 12 days.
Yes, he did.
He stood on his principles. But then he also said, when it comes to death, you've got to tell the truth. And I've in my mind, I've taken him to task on that because, for example, David Hooks, when David Hooks died, Why did Derryn feel it necessary to announce that he was having an extramarital affair and he and his marriage? They had nothing to do with David Hookes, his death, and his cricket career. I couldn't understand why he did that.
This was the journalist side of Hinch that, and again, a great friend, but sometimes I would disagree on some of the principles that he seemed to adhere to, where he was looking for the headline and wanted to be the person that had broken the story. That was always the main aim, was to break the story. And to hell with the consequences. But we go back to the going to prison for the contempt of naming the pedophile. I was in the county court with him when Glennon was being sentenced.
Right.
And I have never seen a more pathetic individual in my life. He was a sallow-faced, I'm not being very careful here, but he was sentenced and there was no reaction from him. And I thought how the church knew, how they kept moving him around. And this is the thing that really got up Derryn's nostrils, was the cover-ups. Not so much, okay, the offence is bad enough, but when your boss, and that's what the church is, when it covers up and moves priests around knowing that there are certain acts taking place, that's what really got him going. And I would back him 110% on that.
I do too. I back him 100% on that as well. And it's a shame that he was only in the Senate for one term and he felt sad about that because he had a lot more to offer.
Well, he did a deal, wasn't it, with Hanson, and that cut his Senate term in half from memory. I do remember, and I can tell you this, I rang him when he was elected. I said, I can't believe you're a fucking senator. And he said, I can't believe I'm a fucking senator as well. Did I tidy that up enough for you?
I got a funny story for you. I knew Bob Rogers really well.
They were great mates.
Bob was at 2CH when 2CH was in the 2GB building. And anyway, there's Derryn Hinch and Bob Rogers having lunch, Lawsey's Otto at Woolloomooloo.
Which I can see from the window where I'm sitting at the moment in Sydney.
There you are. And this is a true story, and you know it. You know the story. Lawsey has stumbled over to them because he hated both of them.
Yes.
And he pounded his hand. And it's a Friday, sunny, 1 million people there. You two are the biggest pair of C's I've ever known in my life. Everyone could hear it.
Yeah.
And it made the papers. And
of course.
But anyway, I've got to tell you something. A week later, I was talking to Bob Rogers about it, and Bob showed me a written apology from Lawsey.
Really?
Yes, I saw it, and it was signed. I wish to apologise for my appalling behaviour.
Wow.
He wrote Bob, and so I'm assuming maybe he wrote one to Derryn. I don't know, but he wrote Bob Rogers a letter of apology and signed it. I saw it.
Was the princess with him when this happened?
I think so. She would
have said to him, "You were going to apologise for that."
Well, she was back at his table. He walked up.
Yeah, God.
He walked up. But I'll tell you one more Derryn story because you got plenty more. I'm at 2BS in Bathurst, and I was lucky enough to go to 2GB and sit in and watch and learn a few things. And Derryn took some people out for lunch, and I was one of them. We spent about 2 hours, and he was telling us his story and the midday show and all that. And then he finally, after a few bottles of red, it was always red, he said, okay, that's enough about me talking about me. Now, I want all of you to talk about me.
That would be right.
It's a true story. But back to you. He adapted from newspapers to radio. He was sacked so many times from radio. I understand that he used to call himself, he used to say he and Santa had one thing in common. Every December they were looking for a new job. Why was he so polarising, and why, when he was so successful and bringing in massive ratings for 3AW, not necessarily for 2GB, but for 3, why did he keep getting sacked?
Well, I think, again, he was quite defiant with management. I'll tell you the story of his last day on air at 3AW.
Go on.
He was about to, Hinch was coming up on the 7 network, and I was called into the manager's office. And I think it was Mike Peterson. He used to be a reporter for Channel 7. He was the manager of 3AW. And he sat me down. He said, now, we need to discuss Hinch's last program. I said, yes. In what area? He said, you have the dump button. Now, it was an unwritten law in the studio that Derryn was the only one who would hit the dump button. But he said, you have our full permission. If you think he's going to say something that's going to get the station into trouble or its license into trouble, you have permission to hit the dump button. And I said, Mike, thank you, but I won't.
Wow.
Well, I'm ordering you to. And I said, okay, well, I'll need that in writing. And he wouldn't do it in writing, of course. So we went on air, and Derryn was, to the end, polite, his just normal, abrasive, abruptive self, but he never said anything that was... And I think he was that smart, because you're not going to say something, and Carl Stefanovic's learnt this lesson, you're not going to say something on your last radio program that's going to jeopardise your new television.
Burn all your bridges.
Well, exactly. So I knew that he would not do anything stupid. But yeah, look, sometimes, it's sailing a bit close to the wind. We took a call one day from a listener who was concerned about their grandson, who was being interfered with by a member of the 3AW news team.
Oh, I remember. Yes.
Yes.
And I know, and I know who that was.
Yes, so do I.
And in fact, you and I worked
with him.
Yep.
Yes. And so that call went to air, and of course we went straight to a commercial break. So Hitch looked at me and I went, I had my suspicion. And I said, I came on and said, it's 10:10, Derryn, I think we might take a quick break. So we took the break, and he took the headphones off and he said, who is it? And I said, I think it is this bloke.
Yep.
And he said, well, next thing, the news director's come down to the studio, and he said, what's going on? Anyway, turned out it was this fellow that we thought.
Yes.
Who was summarily dismissed straight away, and next thing was being interviewed by police.
Yeah.
So that was one of the memorable moments. But
wow.
There were a couple of very pleasant moments, though, Luke.
What's a good one?
Penelope, no, what was her name? Prunella Scales. I think you called Penelope, Keith had died only a few weeks
That's
back.
right, she did too. The Good Life. No, Prunella Scales, Faulty Towers.
Faulty Towers, right. So she's appearing in a play in Melbourne, and a serious play, like The Madness of King George or something like that.
Yeah.
And Hinch had a rule that he never spoke to the subject of the interview until we went on air. So he'd be out in the production area discussing things, and I would bring the guest in from the waiting room, sit them down, say, that's your microphone. We may ask you to put the headphones on, but don't touch anything else. I'll handle all the rest of it. And anyway, I said to her, I've just seen a production from the BBC shown here locally on the ABC called Outside Edge.
Yeah.
And she smiled. She said, oh, God, I love making that show. It was a one-off BBC thing with Paul Eddington. And she was the wife
from Yes Minister
in the show.
Yes,
from Yes. And it was a little English cricket team. And he was the president of the cricket club, and she was his long-suffering wife.
Right.
And it was set around the local derby between Village A and Village B. And it was just one of those delightful British shows that crop up occasionally. One show, not a series or anything. And she said, oh, we had so much fun making that show, and Paul was wonderful. I said, it was a great cast. Blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, by the way, I should mention, I don't discuss Faulty Towers.
Oh, no.
And I said, that's fine. She said, it's a small volume of my work, as an actor would say. So, of course, I can't tell Derryn that because he's outside. So I've written on a piece of paper, always had a pad in front of me, don't mention Faulty Towers. So he's come in, he said, hello, sat down. I put the piece of paper in front of him. He looked at me like, what? And then I said, it's 10:20, the Derryn Hinch program. The 3AW, Derryn has a very special guest. Yes, my guest is Prunella. Anyway, they talked about her acting and this, that, and the other. Then he said, now, let's talk about Faulty Towers. She said, no, we don't. And got up and walked out.
Oh, no. Oh, no. It's like asking John Cleese, can we not talk about Monty Python or Faulty Towers? And, of course, you want to talk to Prunella Scales about Faulty Towers. Basil? Oh.
It was only, her reasoning was, it was 12 episodes.
It was. And they got no residuals. They got paid as actors.
And there was only, I think it was nearly 2 and a bit years between the episode 6 and episode 1 of series 2. But it was a very small part of her actual career.
Sure.
So she will understand that, it's probably like you or I. We spent, 6 months at a radio station, so what? And spend a lot of time at bigger stations, so they're ones you want to talk about. Anyway, that was the way she looked at it, so we left it at that. But there were others like Jane Fonda.
Yes.
With her videos of doing the fitness thing.
The
Bridget
exercise.
Bardot. one of my heroes. The other thing that Hinch used to do, he'd often be interviewing somebody who'd written a book, and he'd give me the book to read, and so can you do some questions around it? And it was the autobiography of Chuck Yeager, the man who broke the speed of sound.
Speed of sound.
I have a hero or two in my life, and Chuck Yeager is one of them. The Right Stuff is one of the great movies of all time. Anyway, Chuck Yeager's coming in, and he sits down in front of me, and I said, Colonel Yeager. He said, call me Chuck. I said, Chuck, you're just amazing. And The Right Stuff, he said, oh, yeah, it's a great film, and all the crap we're talking about. And I said, I loved your book. And I've got the book sitting there. He said, give me the book. So he gives me and he writes in it to Craig, keep flying. Wow. Colonel Chuck Yeager.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and Hinch knew something about space because he'd covered, the programs. But he didn't know a lot about flying. And so he interviewed Chuck Yeager, went for half an hour. The guy was just a remarkable. He was well in his 80s, I think. So that was one of the treasured moments that I had of my career with the great man.
I've got to ask you about his love affair, and it was a love affair with Jackie Weaver. Married her twice. He was married to, I think, 4 others or 5 others. He'll be sitting next to them at his funeral later this week.
It's going to be a very crowded front row.
It's going to be a very crowded front row. But he married Jackie Weaver twice. Tell me about that love affair.
Jackie was just long-suffering, but in a lovely way. An absolute delight. And his stepson, Dylan, was a lovely man. We saw him, Donna and I met him again. I haven't seen him for a long time, Dylan, at Derryn's 80th birthday that we had at the Emerald Hotel in Melbourne nearly 2 years ago now, isn't it? And pardon me. She was just absolute delight. She called him Joe. That was his nickname for her. She stuck by him with everything, all the drama and everything. We all ended up at the High Court to hear a decision by the justices of the High Court of Australia. Because, Jackie was a star of Australian film and television and has been working in the United States. She was in Yellowstone. She was an Academy Award nominee and a wonderful person. Not many people would know she was Dux of Hornsby Girls High School, Luke.
Right. There you are. But it was a love affair that never really ended. And I think
they were always great. I think they spoke most times nearly every day.
Isn't that amazing?
And then, he's of late had a wonderful friendship with Linda Stoner.
That's right.
And she's been very much on the scene of late, which is terrific for him and looking after him. But, look, I don't delve too much into his private life in that particular department. He was obviously an attractive man to women, shall we put it that way.
He had something, didn't he?
Not unlike ourselves, Luke, on mobile.
Exactly. I was about to say. And another one of his foibles, and he attracted a lot of criticism, was that he had a liver transplant and was lucky enough to find a donor, but then continued to drink. And he really upset the family of the donor. Did he ever talk to you about that?
Look, I saw him before the transplant. In fact, I mentioned this to Donna just the other day, that the old 3AW in Bank Street, South Melbourne, and I was coming in to do some voiceovers for the footy, and he was in the foyer.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Derryn, you look like shit. And he said, I'm Wallaby Edwarded, and I need a transplant. So I met the transplant surgeon, actually, a lovely man. But he was lucky to have the transplant from a man who had not led the healthiest of lifestyles himself, I'm led to believe.
Right.
But part of the agreement is that when you have the transplant, you sign a document saying you won't drink again.
Is that right?
So Derryn's liver had a cancerous growth on it, but he had the transplant, and he didn't drink for quite a while. But, of course, he then would say, I'm having a glass of white wine with water in it, or white wine with ice. But I never really... we hadn't socialised in that department for quite a while, so I'm not exactly sure what the consumption rate was.
My understanding, it was at times excessive, and no wonder the family of the donor were upset. But I mean, there it is. He made another headline, didn't he? He was.
Yeah, well, that's true.
He was all.
True.
Tell me about the "That's Life" Frank Sinatra song. That was his. Where did that come from, Craig?
I have no idea. But it was always the theme that we played every morning. We'd start off with with the organ. There you go. That's life. Good morning. In a lot of ways, he revolutionised Australian radio with the introduction at 8:35 after the news with a hard-hitting editorial, which he would write in the morning, and obviously it was on a current topic or an older topic that he wanted to raise again, which then engendered a lot of calls into the program, and it sort of revolutionised the way a lot of people present their show.
Well, people at my end of the radio dial, we all copied Lawsy and he had El Presidente, and he would start off with some editorials written by somebody else and talk about how.
That was another thing that Derryn wrote all his own material.
Yeah, Lawsy had it written for him. Yeah.
I think John Bailey used to write.
John Bailey, exactly. And I went to school with another one of his producers who went on to work on the Australian Story. I won't mention her name, but I know how the Lawsy machine worked pretty well with his handmaidens. Was Derryn kind of like that? Remember, Lawsy used to insist that his female workers wore skirts, and he used to refer to them as handmaidens. Remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
But that's another story.
No, he had a wonderful young assistant. She was only a young kid at the time and stayed friends with her, Susie Yeager.
Oh, yeah.
With Derryn for a long, long time. And then Annette Philpott for a long, long time. She was, in fact, Annette used to be his driver because he was vehement opponent to drink driving. So he had an old Rolls Royce.
Shame. Oh, that's right. That's right. The shame file on the Hinch show, yeah.
That's right. And Annette was his driver. And then she went on to be his political advisor assistant when he was in the Senate.
Wow.
And has been part of his life for a long, long time. A lovely lady. And Pamela Graham, that worked at Channel 7, came to 3AW to work with Derryn as the sort of on-the-road producer, if you like, and reporter. So it was a pretty tight-knit team that were working with him. But he always respected them.
Well,
and I think he would have thought handmaidens was a term that wasn't appropriate.
No,
put it that way.
No, it was for another time and place, and that was Lawsy. But back to Derryn, absolutely a brilliant print journalist, and then radio, television. He did it all. Was sacked so many times, but kept pushing back and kept reinventing himself. But was always the human headline. You'll be at the funeral later this week, Craig. How would you like Australia to remember Derryn Hinch?
I would think the best phrase I could come up with, they don't make it like him anymore.
And that's life.
That's life. That's what all the people say.
Craig Willis, thank you so much.
Great pleasure, Luke.
Well, it was a little while ago now that we spoke on the Bonafide podcast with a young man with a vision, 20-year-old Will Shackle, who is the founder of Nuclear for Australia. In fact, when we spoke to him, he was in Vienna at a nuclear conference. And some of you disagree with what he has to say. A lot of you agreed with what he had to say, but nearly all of you said that's interesting. It's something to think about. And it got me thinking about someone that I spoke to when I was on national radio. Ironically, we spoke to this politician's father not so long ago. The father I'm talking about is Bob Katter, and his son is Robbie Katter. Now, Robbie Katter is an interesting onion. We love to talk to interesting onions here. Robbie Katter is the leader of Katter's Australian Party, KAP. He is a member for the electoral district of Traeger, which is in the Queensland Parliament. He was first elected back in 2012. He's a political voice that represents, he says, the interests of regional and rural communities in North and Northwest Queensland. However, he has a national vision as well. So I like to talk to interesting people. He is certainly an interesting person. He joins me again. It's been a while. G'day.
It has been a while. Yeah, thanks, Luke. Great to be talking to you again.
It's good to talk to you too, Robbie. We got a great response from my conversation with your father, and he is a character.
Yeah, that's one way to describe him.
How would you? Because of course you had your grandfather was in politics, so you come from a long lineage of politics in your family. But
yeah,
tell me, was it your dad that inspired you?
Oh, in many ways, yes. He almost inspired me to get out of it because his confrontational approach is sort of, it's a bit cliched, but maybe it was inspiring to watch him, and especially when you see some of their achievements and you think, crikey, wouldn't that be good to say that you're part of that move to get that wonderful piece of infrastructure, all that policy change. And yeah, so he was a part of that in a lot of ways, but I've got to say, heavily qualify that. He never said one word, not breathed a word about you should get into politics or why don't you have a think about this, or he stayed well away from that decision making, so it was all my own.
But I guess with your grandfather as well, I mean, and you go back to the Joe Bjelke-Peterson days of Queensland politics, and it was confrontational, and it got not just Queensland, but the country talking, and I guess that's what your dad does, and that's what we want, and that's what we want to do today, Robbie. I know that you have a lot of time for young Will Shackle, and we'll get to the nuclear debate in just a second, because I'm keen to know your thoughts. And are we being hampered? Are government policies and are large business policies hampering our exploration into nuclear power as a main source of our power? But I know that lately you've been blowing up Deluxe about overspending when it comes to preparing for the 2032 Olympics.
Yep.
And government spending, every economist will tell you, leads to inflation.
Yep.
It exacerbates inflation. Maybe that's a better word.
Yep.
So why are you concerned about what you say is our obsession with preparing for the Olympics in 2032?
Well, I'll probably go back to the genesis of the conception of the idea. I would argue it was seen as a wonderful distraction from all the other problems that we've got, because if you're a party in government, you get to say, but look at this, look at the shiny bauble over here, and keep saying, well, we're, making an announcement on a new stadium next week. And who's going to be angry about a new stadium? I mean, I get a front row seat to industry and manufacturing out here where I represent. You can see where they keep coming short. They're not vote winners, building a rail line and transmission line. They're not vote winners, but that's the stuff you need to be able to pay for, the Olympics in 30 years' time. You don't spend money on Olympics now to make money. Everyone seems to forget no one else in the entire globe bid for that Olympics. We didn't win it. We just got it by default because no one else put their hand up. Why did no one else put their hand up? I think because they knew how much these things cost. That's someone else's problem down the track. They just get to cut the ribbon on new stadiums and things and talk about how great it'll be and mix with the athletes. And everyone thinks that's a great thing, but someone's got to be the grown up here and say, guys, we can't really afford this. And Professor Colin Dwyer in Townsville, his estimate is it to be 60 billion a cost, and the average is around 20 billion for the
60.
last. I think it's
60
so the average cost is 20 billion, and they've been saying, it probably only costs 5 or 10 billion, which of course you're going to have to add GST for it. I mean, I'm speaking figuratively, you're going to have to add GST, but of course they're always going to short ball the whatever number they're going to give up front, because they don't want to let you know how much they're going to spend on this. I mean, they're just big numbers, and that's going to come from somewhere. And if your coal mining is waning, you'd say at the moment, they're saying they can't build copper string, which is the lifeblood of the Northwest Mineral Province, we need to keep the mining going out here. They haven't got the money for that, so they're saying we can't build that. We'll have to put that on the back burner. They're saying we're going to build it. They just won't give a timeline, which means we've got to put it on the back burner. So all this productive infrastructure that they need, not even the stuff we need, but stuff that could help build the state and help pay for things so you can have a party in 20 or 30 years' time. They're neglecting that, and it's just that short-term bloody political cycle, just keep people happy, don't upset them too much and keep them distracted. So it's probably, it's not so much the Olympics itself. I mean, who doesn't love the Olympics? I love watching the Olympics, but it's more that the idea that governments just spend money on bells and whistles and trinkets for people, and particularly in the city, so they can keep them distracted, while in the background and especially in the regional areas where it's further from sight, people's optics, things are falling apart at the seams, and those things are intricate parts of our economy that need to go forward. But you also said it in your introduction as well, as just the inflationary height, like pushing all that construction and forcing it, it's going to put inflationary pressure, and it will suck all the resources, so if you try and build a bitumen road or a hospital or anything outside of Brisbane for the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be very, very difficult because all the resources down there. And some of that stuff, like some of the infrastructure, I'm not going to say it's completely useless, like if they're doing the rail to Sunshine Coast and more housing and units, it's not useless, but it's just it's a very crude way of trying to run an economy, and I think it's very immature, and it's probably more just it's not pointing the finger at Liberal or Labor or anything. It's just an immature way to run things, and it's a function of what we've become with this modern political landscape.
Because you look at what was described as the best Olympics ever by Juan Antonio Samaranch, Sydney, which cost back then $3.8 billion, which is about 6.6 now. And there was a fair bit of infrastructure there that wasn't used again, but most of it was. But it was a very successful tourism tool for Sydney and Australia, wasn't it? And a lot of people would argue that it brought the nation together. It certainly brought Sydney together, and that it was worth every cent. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't say it's worth every cent. Like, again, nice things to have. Well, let me put it this way. Like, I know, say when there's an industry breakdown in regional areas of Australia, they say, well, that's okay that you lost your smelter there because we're going to build tourism. And tourism it's a great thing. And certainly on the coast, if you go to those tourism meccas we've got in Australia, limiting to Queensland, the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast and Port Douglas, those places, they run on their own steam. They're fantastic tourist attractions, but they'll say in Western areas, that's okay if your town's dying or the industry's dying there because we'll build you this tourist centre or, and that'll help business in town. Well, look at any of those, and Longreach included. Those things, they need money pumped into them continuously, taxpayers' money to pump them up. They're not, and you wouldn't say the same as about a beef industry or mining industry or whatever. You build a rail line for the next 50 years, they power the economy, like fully power the economy. When they say it's like this really profitable industry, I think the metrics they use are very, very generous to the events. So they say business case associated with that. I'd love to have the business case that they use for things like these events and these stadiums and apply that to building a dam or a railway line anywhere in Australia, because if we got to use the same metrics, we'd be building dams and railway lines all around Australia. So they use these very generous business cases. I don't recall the Sydney one, but I know the average for the last 20 years is 20 billion, around 20 or close to 20 billion for Olympics. And, the last one was a couple of years ago, so those costs didn't go down in that time. Yeah, so, let's even say it's 20 billion and we do it as cheap as the rest of the world's done it. That's a big price tag. I think our entire state budget here in Queensland is 140 billion. So you've got to park that into an event that goes for 2 weeks. Yeah, it puts us on the world stage. That's great. But does that mean Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast knows all fire to the same amount that they would have otherwise without sort of any international recognition to the tune of 20 billion? I think it'll be I can't explain it any better, but I just can't see how that is a good use of people's money. And when people are struggling in other areas.
I'll pick two past Olympic destinations for you to pick at. One of them's Greece. The other one's Brazil, Rio. Yeah, which sent them broke. It absolutely sent them broke. So I don't know if that was massively mismanaged. But if you build better roads, better rail, and more housing, just those three, isn't that good for Queensland in the long run? I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, it's a good point to raise. And if you were giving me the reins of the government in Queensland tomorrow, would that be my priority? Like doing that sort of housing and that sort of rail? No, I'd be saying, mate, let's go and build some things that can make us some money to pay for this stuff and build housing in the areas that we need to build it, not just the areas that, suit for the Olympics, like villages or wherever the, high pressure is going to be there in 2032. There'd be some cross-pollination, I guess, of benefit from in your housing, but that's not the priority stuff. If you didn't have the Olympics, you'd have a whole different set of priorities that you'd be saying, crikey, let's do this so that we can make sure this makes us a lot of money. So, because I understand it must come along across as parochial for me saying something, but like if you ask me what some priorities, I'd say, well, definitely copper string. And the government's saying, yep, we're definitely building that, but there's not enough. In fact, they just pulled $12 billion out of the budget for it. But it's only a $5 billion project. That $12 billion is a silly number. Mate, that doesn't give me cheaper power or, really help Mount Isa economy, that much proportionately. That's to help the state. I'm trying to help the state's economy rebuild, and the biggest copper mine in Queensland is being built right now called Little Eva. They're right next door to a mine that's connected to a baseload power station here in Mount Isa, so they could easily, practically they could connect to a baseload power station out here that everyone else uses, but their cheapest form of energy is a diesel-fired generator. For like 50 megawatts, that's a massive mine, like a massive usage. That would power a small city, that amount of power. That's their cheapest form of power, and that's their preferred option. In this modern day and age in Queensland, that should be an embarrassment. The federal government should be an embarrassment to the state government. That's what industry is dealing with in Queensland to try and counter what's being lobbed on them by governments. And their big priority at the moment is Olympic Games, not to fix those sort of things.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to hear what my listeners say, and any feedback, Robbie, we will pass on to you.
Sure.
And I'm sure you'd appreciate it. So would you be a fan of Australia and the Pacific hosting something like a FIFA World Cup?
Oh, mate, look, depending on the cost. Like, I love sport, mate. I live for it. My dream was to play Queensland rugby league for Queensland. It was.
Oh, if only you trained harder, Robbie. If only you trained harder,
exactly,
you would have been playing State of Origin last week.
Issue with the discipline. No, but mate, I love sport, and it can't be in terms of I just don't like this stuff, but I just can't unsee the deficit in effort in areas where it's desperately needed. Politics just is a constant source of let's build a stadium. They did it in Townsville when the whole northwest was about to collapse and the smelter was about to collapse. Their big thing is building a new stadium in Townsville. Is the new stadium in Townsville good? It's brilliant. I love it. But you just got to get your priorities right. And you can't deny it's good to have, but this stuff almost collapsed out here and in that same time. And there was, in the end, people did turn around and start lobbying and getting behind things in the Northwest Mineral Province to keep things alive. And I should qualify that by saying Townsville's industry is very heavily linked to the Northwest Mineral Province. All the mining goes out here because it goes to the port in Townsville. Athletes and events need champions, but industry and the economy needs a champion. And I think there's a deficit of champions for industry and economy, and there's 99% of politicians are lining up to be the champion of populist infrastructure that wins votes and gets them through the next election. So I just need to be a counterpoint to that because we need some sense and reason in there somewhere.
Okay, I'll give you one more positive for a home Olympics, and then we can move to another topic. But no one can deny one of the greatest moments of the Sydney 2000 Olympics was Kathy Freeman, and the number of kids that took up little athletics. And the Aboriginal kids that saw her as a leader. And it inspired them. The same way, I guess, Indigenous AFL and rugby league players inspire young kids to get healthy and to be successful at sport. But you look at the amount of kids that took up swimming because of Ian Thorpe. And when you host an Olympics, when it's your home Olympics, statistically, the home team does do pretty well.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that also improve the health of young Australians if we're successful?
Oh, maybe, but just too big a price to pay. Like, Colin Dwyer's gone through those figures of his 60 billion. Even if you give it, even if you said it's 20 billion, which is just the average of the last 20 years, even if you just said 20 billion, that they're all great things. And I remember that emotion on Catherine Freeman's face very well. And it's emblazoned in my head. Fantastic moments, but are they worth $10 billion or $20 billion of taxpayers' money? I don't think so.
Let's ask the question. Is it worth the money? It's a good debate to have. So let's have that debate. Robbie Katter is with me. Robbie, I mentioned Will Shackle at the beginning of our chat, and you're a bit of a fan. He's a passionate young man, and he believes that we need to go nuclear. And as I said to Will, I was bitterly disappointed when Peter Dutton said that going nuclear would be a major election platform, and they dumped it. They dropped it. They ran away from it. Maybe they did some focus groups and they thought, no, we'll give this one a miss. But I was looking forward to the debate. So Will Shackle was interesting. Why are you a fan of going nuclear?
Well, to go back to your thing at the start, like we were talking about conflict and getting in politics, like the way, you get over that, way I get over that is just be focused on outcomes. And, once you lock on to what you think the right thing is to do, or people get in your way, then you get angry because you're frustrated because you can see things that the logic of it. And this is just one of those things, like, it's like culling crocodiles or ethanol biofuel mandates. They're just simple, easy things that can be done that would assist and don't cost much money. And uranium mine, like they're saying, I've got a tight budget. Again, if I compared it to, say, the copper string, we can't afford copper string. We've got to find out a way to fund it. And you've got an industry there. The traditional enemy of nuclear and uranium is the Labor Party, or, the sort of left side of politics. And there you have the Prime Minister raising in hand triumphantly with Modi saying, we're going to sell them all this uranium and let's celebrate it, and in a way condoning it, which is pretty hypocritical as they've been a backstop against it for so long, particularly in Queensland. But the LNP's in government in Queensland at the moment, and, we're here, we're fresh change, and you say, well, fine, like, why don't you mind this stuff? What's your ideological bent against it. They will say, which is their political response is, well, we didn't take that to the election and so we're not doing it, which is just garbage because there's examples where they have done stuff that they didn't take the election or vice versa. There's just no logic against it. We took it into a debate in the Queensland Parliament the other day. No one turned up. No one turned up to the debate, which is extraordinary. We have no one participating in the debate. So we put a motion for debate up. One person did, which is obligated to as the Mines Minister in Queensland. Last he participated in the debate, but he offered nothing on nuclear. He just said critical minerals or uranium mining. He just said, we define critical minerals this and we're doing all this for critical minerals. It's weird that people are so scared of the issue they won't even debate it or talk about it, pretend it's not there. And it's a $15 to $19 billion industry we can participate in. And South Australia's allowed to participate in it. We're not. Why are we not allowed to participate in it? Please give me a reason why. I'd love to know. And, good on Peter Dutton. And I think you're absolutely right. I think these young party hacks that think they know everything with no life experience that get in these political parties and run their focus groups and tell people what to do, but don't have enough interaction out there in the real world to know what people really want to think. And that's the essence of real leadership, is not trying to just, focus group everything or, survey monkey everything, is actually try and find out what the right thing to do is and pursue it, which Peter Dutton did, and then, got wide-handed by his party and pulled back on it. And it was a perfectly logical thing to do. The funny thing, I think, with nuclear energy too is that big split in the Greens now, where you've got the sort of the 1970s and 80s hippies that are age now, they're still holding on to Chernobyl and Fukushima and saying, oh, goodness me, we can't have that, which is just a silly argument. But the new breed are sort of like, well, why not? Because they're looking for logic. Why aren't we doing this? And they're all into net zero. I'm not, but they're all into it, saying, well, if this can help bloody save the planet, we should be. Why aren't we thinking about it? Why aren't we doing it?
Well, I'll tell you something
good question.
I'll tell you something Will Shackle said, and I urge you to go back to my Will Shackle episode on Bonafide. I think you'll find it interesting. He admits that it's expensive to create and run a nuclear power plant, but he says in the long run it's worth it. He admits that. He also says, yes, I understand people's fear. You mentioned Chernobyl and we mentioned Fukushima. And you have to have a country that's geographically, is that the word? Geographically. Geographically.
No, it might be geologically.
Geologically and geographically stable.
Yeah.
But there was something he couldn't quite answer. And so let me put it to you. Let's look at a city the size of Townsville. I'm going into your backyard here. Population 206,000. How much nuclear waste, if you powered Townsville 100% by nuclear power, how much nuclear waste does that create? Because I want to know. I'm not being a smartass. Is it a shoebox? Is it an oil drum? Is it an Olympic swimming pool? I don't know. How much waste will that create to power a city of 206,000 people?
What I couldn't say is the time period, but let's say for a year, I'm pretty sure you're looking under, it's like from a drum, a barrel to a container tops, but I don't think it's...
like a shipping container?
Yeah, but I don't even think it's that. I think it's more a barrel. Interesting thing is the waste is, going right back to Bob Hawke days, I think they were tendering, trying to get the waste. They just closed off and shut down. It's all collapsing. A 2-kilometre lead-encased tomb. You want inert, sort of stable geography, come out to Mount Isa. And if you built the copper string, the transmission line out here that fed power back into the grid, the national grid, if people still want to get the heebie-jeebies about putting it near the coast or and put it out of Mount Isa, and mate, you'd have 90% support for it here, and you'd be putting strong base load right next to be facilitating mineral processing, so value adding, which, you're saying spending money on infrastructure, like we've got all these resources in Australia, but we're not value adding to them. A lot of that is because we don't have the energy, and adequate energy and enough of it, and sort of good, reliable energy. We've just got gas-fired power out here, but if you can put that out here, and I've had that from the mining industry before, we'd start looking at processing, closer where the resources are. And that's not limited just to the Northwest Mineral Province. That's, any other mineral province you've got in Queensland or Australia, you can do these things. And like Will said, they're expensive to set up. But I think the best analogy I got from, I've forgotten his name now, one of the professors from the university on this said, if you wanted to make the comparison, say, to nuclear to renewables, you might make an argument, that renewable solution is cheaper over the next 10 years. But he said it's equivalent to saying if I wanted to accommodate you for the next 10 or 20 years in shelter, I can put you in a tent. That'll do fine. It'll keep you out of the weather, keep you out of the elements. Won't be great in the winter, but it'll do its job. Or I can put you in a brick cavity home. You'd say, well, put me in a bloody brick cavity home. You're done and dusted. You're done for the next 50, 100 years. You can live safely and soundly in that home. You're in the tent. You'll be putting up a second awning, steel awning over it after the first big hailstorm, and then you'll be trying to put a slab on the ground to get you out of the ground and try and improve things. I thought that's a really good analogy compared to renewables. You're putting all these transmissions stuff in, and you got to put some solar wind over there, so we need more transmission lines and more batteries and more substations. But you put one big ass base load nuclear plant, it costs you more up front, but in the long run you're going to be a lot better off because you've got strong, reliable base load, and it'll work out a lot cheaper in the long run. And we're seeing the cost of those renewables hitting the pocket now in Australia from everyone sort of selling the lie on, they're so much cheaper. And they're cheaper in some ways, but altogether there's a hell of a lot of cost associated with that. So Will makes a really good point there.
I want to talk about another form of infrastructure, and we're going to start in Queensland, but this is not just for Queensland. This is for the whole country. And I'm keen to know your thoughts on this. One of the most precious resources that this country or any country can have is water. And this country suffers massive drought. We could be feeding all of Australia and Southeast Asia, but we suffer drought at the worst possible times. And yet we have so much water that falls up in the top of Queensland during the wet season that comes out of the sky, onto the ground or onto rooftops, runs down into the ocean. And unless you've got a rain tank or a desal plant, it's wasted water. What do you think of the idea of building massive dams and harvesting the water that runs out into the ocean during the wet season and piping it to where it's desperately needed down south and out west, and making it a piece of infrastructure of national importance like the Snowy Hydro scheme? I'm just pulling ideas out of my ass here, but
you're a very good man setting that up on a tee for me, because that, like, if
I didn't mean to do that.
I don't think you did. The way you're talking about it, but that's my bread and butter, mate. And most people, I think, intuitively understand that, but it's a very frustrating part of politics, modern politics. So they will say, the Bradfield scheme is the panacea, I guess, of water development in Australia. And Dr. Bradfield, who built the Story Bridge, Sydney Harbour Bridge, the University of Queensland, built and made great court there.
And designed Sydney's underground train system, by the way.
Oh, well, there you go. Just enormously accomplished. He went up there and drew the design surveys for this and was all cross-checked and ground truth subsequently through the next 70 or 80 years, and was almost built very close to getting started when Sir Joe was in, and I forget who was in federal parliament. I think Labor. Well,
it would have been Bob Hawke, because it was Bob Hawke praying for Joe for PM, and that was Bob Hawke who was in.
I'm pretty sure it was around that time. They were very close to. It's gone, but ever since then, ever since that Joe era, they just built nothing in Queensland. And I'd probably blame the bureaucrats more than anything, but mate, I'm very well versed in this. And I mean, look, to try and say why nothing's built is when they value. If you do a business case for a stadium, or the business case for the Cross River Rail in Brisbane, they said, oh, yeah, this thing will make you heaps of money. Oh, it's brilliant. It's definitely got to spend your money on this because... And then if you go into the business case, they put dollars per step for people walking to the train station of an estimated population there, and said that's why it's worth so much. And look, I'm not saying can't have a train station or not good things to do, but that's pretty generous, like saying you make money from doing that. For a dam, they say, how big is it and cost you $2 billion to build it, and how much can you sell the water for? Right, so however you sell much that water for at the back end, that's all it's worth. And they'll say, that'll never pay for the $2 billion. And you go, are you crazy? Like, you've just turned like 1 million acres that's worth $300 an acre into conservatively $8,000 an acre. Like, you've just converted the national wealth and and to bring that down to scale, to a small scale. A friend of mine is up here in the north, had a little farm, and it would make you about 30 or 40 grand a year just grazing cattle, which is what everyone does in that district. They get farming on there, about 500 acres of farming, and make 600 grand a year. That's net profit.
Yeah.
But So multiply that by 1,000 farms on one river system.
Yep.
That's what you can do for the national wealth. And that, he's paying tax on 600 grand now to help build your hospitals and schools and everything in Queensland on the same piece of dirt, same bit of water that was flowing out to sea. And there's your business case for a dam, but they won't allow that. They just say, no, how much did he buy the water for? And he probably paid 10 grand or 20 grand a year. And they say, well, that's what it's worth, whatever you sold the water for.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah,
And,
I'm not even talking about one dam. I'm talking about 2 or 3.
And that's what we need to do all over the country.
I agree. We've got to harvest water. I mean, you can live without oil. It wouldn't be much fun, but you cannot live without water. It is so precious. Having lived on a farm when I worked in regional radio, I know what it's like to run out. We had tank water. But here's the thing. The people who say it would never work, just look at what works. During the wet season, and particularly seasons of flood in North Queensland, folks, 9 months later, Lake Eyre fills up. That's where the water runs to. I'm serious, Robbie.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. I was in Windora at the weekend just seeing the effect of that, what you're saying.
Anyway, it's a bugbear of mine. And
no, mate, it's absolutely insane that we watch that water go out to sea and... and I guess people say, oh, well, you'll ruin the natural ecology. Well,
and the salination, that's another argument I've heard, that it would ruin the salination.
We disrupted the ecology the moment we stepped foot on here, like on the country, everything's disrupted and everything's out of balance now. And, and it's not to say you can't still have some, sustainable practice and all that sort of stuff. Mate, I challenge anyone to come out to Mount Isa because we're semi-desert. I mean, it's horribly arid.
Yeah.
And there's 2 big-ass dams here that you go and drive out there and go, wow, that's amazing. You say, mate, this is only 1/10 of it. You go up in the air, you'll see this is only 1/10 of this dam. And this is a dry, and you think, where does the water come from? It all came in like 1 month back in December, and we stored it. And there's another dam on the same river system down there because you're allowed to build things back then, and the mines paid for 100% of the one here and 60% of the one up the road. And the government's done everything they could to stuff up and restrict usage. And actually that same mine I talked about before that has the diesel-fired generator now, they couldn't even get access to this big-ass dam that's only 30 k's from their boundary. They couldn't access the water. And it's 80% full most of the time. And the Sunwater, the state government, couldn't do a deal with them. They said, even if we could access the water, it was too expensive. I mean, that's the madness of what we've got now. Just managing our existing dams, they've made a mess of it. We're just so constrained as a country, and someone's going to do it one day. We just limit ourselves so much. And I often wonder if it's just bringing that back to the people ourselves. We've been conditioned not to even think of this stuff, that we can do it. That's just so sad because we've got so much potential to value add it to our resources, value add in our mining, and have the mineral processing in Australia to be farming this land and get, extracting 5 or maybe even 10 times the value in some cases by adding water in these places. But we just deny ourselves that fact politically because we accept, it's just too hard or it can't be done. And it's sad, mate.
It is. It's worth talking about. One last thing for you, Robbie Katter. The Resolve poll out today in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age.
Yeah.
One Nation has dropped from 29% of the primary vote from 20 down to 26%. It's dropped 3 points. Now, I was watching Channel 7 Sunrise this morning and Barnaby Joyce was on, and there was debate. I couldn't quite understand his answer because it was put to him that maybe it was Pauline Hanson's talking about us being a monoculture or from a multiculture to a monoculture. And I've spoken to Pauline Hanson about that. Her comments left some people confused and some people fired up in fierce agreement that we can't be multicultural, but we should all have one Australian culture. And so I'm asking so let me ask you, what is, to Robbie Katter, the definition of Australian culture? I've made you think, haven't I?
Yeah.
But it's a fair question, isn't it? What is the definition of Australian culture when Pauline Hanson says we don't want to be multicultural, we want to be monocultural, we want to all embrace Australian culture. So what is Australian culture? What's the definition?
Okay, I've never thought to answer this question, or perhaps I've never had it put to me, but I'm happy to give it a crack. I believe our job and I'll say as political leaders, you're expected to have some direction of where aspirationally how you want people to be and come together as a community. And I think that's really important to set that agenda. It's not just an aggregated mess where just anyone does whatever they like. I think that's silly. You need to have some belief, because where there isn't, there'll be a vacuum. And I think there's a lot of truth in what's been said, not just by Pauline, we've said it ourselves, that if you don't have a strong spine on something, it will invite in something else. And I think there's some of that, the scariest stuff of that is that hardcore radical Muslim culture that...
Radical. Let's emphasize radical, because I don't mind Muslims or Buddhists or anything.
Sure.
So long as those people that come from that background obey Australian laws and don't want to kill you if you disagree with them.
Well, let me speak plainly from my point of view. Australia's built on Christian values. I think added to that, which is not, is a work ethic, is an expectation that you come here to add value.
Contribute.
And that doesn't, and when I say Christian values, it doesn't mean everyone has to go to church every week. Christian values is look after your fellow man, respect one another, egalitarian sort of values so we don't adopt that class system that, say, you have in India. That's not something I think we should be inviting in or aspiring to. Some of that stuff they do in the Muslim countries with the women and subordinating the women, and that's probably an extreme example, but some of that stuff's no good. You don't want to invite that stuff in. So you got to pick something. Someone better tell me what's so wrong with the Christian values that we're built on, that was in our constitution, that was sort of, embedded in everything we did. That served us pretty well, got rid of slavery worldwide, and modern day everyone, that's not trendy, and oh no, goodness me, I mean, it's almost laughable talking about Christian values, but that's a good start. But I think some there as well, I always think it helps put in context of ideas rather than trying to articulate it and perhaps doing a clumsy job here. But I was in the survey in a roadhouse in a remote area of Queensland, of my electorate, and a really dark-skinned Indian bloke, and I forgot his name. I shouldn't use his name anyway, but they said, oh, so-and-so wants to see you. And it was just after one of those Australia Day rallies that I'd spoken at, and I thought, oh, here we go, he's going to... And he said, just want to congratulate you and your dad for your son. He said, I'm sick of all these bastards coming here, don't want to work, just bloody riding and down the streets rallying. He said, tell them to get their ass into work and like I am. I thought you don't want to say that work ethic. Like, if you're coming here to work and you're doing, and you might want to practice another religion or something, that's fine. But just put your head down and don't go out there sort of protesting all the time and soaking up resources when we're all here to work. We're happy to do it yourself, and you'll be accepted.
Yeah, see, I haven't got a problem with someone who is a Muslim and follows the teachings of Muhammad. It's radical Islam, and you said it. It's radical. Sharia law is what concerns me. But so, I mean, you look at someone that worships Muhammad, a Muslim, Ahmed, the Bondi hero. Look at this bloke.
They've been out here since, I think the camel herders were the first. They were the biggest employment group after mining in the establishment of North West Mineral Province. And when my family first came over, they were running clothes shops on the goldfields, and the second biggest workforce after mining was the camel herders from Afghanistan. They're all Muslims, so this whole mosques and mates, all this stuff is embedded in our culture, and it's fine. But no one's going to tell me we don't have a problem with sort of that stuff. Because I mean, I saw evidence of this sort of 10 years ago where they're just starting to aggregate, and there does seem to be some real hateful, hostile sort of attitudes, and I've encountered it myself, not often, but I've encountered it, and whatever it is in there is sort of a hostile attitude that needs to be arrested.
We just don't want people here who hate our way of life.
Yeah, correct.
Don't come here if you don't accept Australian values. Forget religion. Put religion out the window. If you don't accept Australian values and refuse to obey Australian laws, don't come here. Although I would say it is a good marker, because I assume when people are trying to get in, they'll just say whatever they have to say. That's right. How do you police it?
How do you police it? But if someone's coming from war-torn country that's got and they're Muslim and there's heavily you'd say you're going to have to ask the question, like, if you've got some peaceful Burmese people at the same time trying to get in, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to go with these guys because, and those people might be good people trying to get in from the Muslim country, but I just can't take the risk on that. And actually, I was asked this question once in a parliamentary debate. They said, well, surely you've got to agree with this, that there should be no bias in
because we believe in freedom of religion in Australia.
Well, yeah, but I just said, I can't come at that because, I mean, we express bias all the time. Like if you're employing someone and, someone just come out of 10 years of prison and you've got the same person next door, same qualifications, guess who you're going to employ? Like it's a tough thing to say, but that's just, we express bias in all sorts of ways and you try not to. Like, of course I don't try not to. Personally, I try and live out good Christian values. I mean, most people are trying to be good people most of the time, but yeah, if you've got refugees from a wartime country that have a propensity to violence, I think you should be looking twice at their application when they're coming in because you keep bringing in a lot from that country, it's going to run a big risk than alternate countries. So I don't know how they can say there should be no bias in the immigration policy. Of course, there should be some bias. I mean, you got to express some sort of discretion, I suppose you'd say, and trying to bring in the people that are less propensity or are more going to assimilate with those things that we've become accustomed in Australia. And come back to your question, I can leave out the word Christian and just say those values are like look after your mate, try and look after those people who are falling behind, and that goes a lot to your social, your welfare and that sort of thing, and Aboriginal communities, things like that, and trying to do something for your country, like contribute to the country. Yeah, it's not what you can do for you, it's what you can do for your country, in the words of John F. Kennedy.
Well, that's right. Or as Christ said, do to your fellow man as you'd have him do to you. And if we just did that one thing, we're through to the semis without dropping a set. Robbie, the motto of the podcast is, we don't tell you what to think. I don't tell you what to think. I like to give you something to think about. You've given us plenty to think about today. Thank you so much.
Luke, it's a real pleasure, mate. And it's great to be able to talk about these things on a public platform that's hopefully, generates a bit of discussion.
That's what we're here for, to create discussion. And Robbie Katter, we will let you know what the feedback is to our chat today. Give my regards to your dad. I hope that he now can safely pay cash for his fish lunch in Parliament House, thanks to him.
Yeah.
And
it's a good one.
It was a beauty, wasn't it? It was an absolute beauty. And Robbie, how about we talk more regularly? Would you like that?
I'd love it, Luke. I'd really appreciate it.
You take care of yourself. I'll let you get back to it.
Mate.
Okay.
See you, mate.
They get Robbie Katter, leader of the Katter Australian Party.
It's the Bonafide crew, talking truth from the care, stories from the black top.
Well, often we focus our foreign affairs attention to the United States of America, but gee whiz, the last few weeks we've certainly been focused on the UK. A new Prime Minister just around the corner, another one has gone. We've got a royal visit from Harry, or is it royal? Was he getting police protection? Did he have a reuniting moment with his father? Is everything okay now? And what about the World Cup? Ben Downie is Channel 7's correspondent in the UK, joins me now on his day off. It's very generous of you to give us some time, buddy.
Pleasure.
Hey, listen, I've got so many questions. We'll talk about Prince Harry's visit to the UK in just a sec. But the UK about to embrace a new Prime Minister who will walk into the job, is yet to face an election. And Sir Keir Starmer resigning after a landslide victory, and his own I guess ally, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, has said they were never ready to govern. What happened to Sir Keir Starmer? And tell me, what do we know about the incumbent?
Okay, so the story of Keir Starmer, basically, Keir came to power by basically getting rid of the person who was previously Labor leader, Jeremy Corbyn. So he and his consiglieres effectively destroyed or knifed the far left wing of the Labor Party, and sort of punching left is the political term. And in the lead up to the election, whilst he was opposition leader. And by doing this, they basically embraced a small target strategy, kind of the way Anthony Albanese first took power to Scott Morrison. Don't put too many policies out there, retreat from fights, let the opponent, who is sort of, an aging Liberal government in Australia, just like it was an aging Conservative government over here, sort of fall over. And they were basically voted out rather than the other government being voted in.
Right.
But they were so so determined in this civil war inside the party and obsessed about trying to actually win an election. But when they came to their power, they didn't have a hardline agenda. They pursued some policies and made some really tough decisions that are paying dividends right now. Things like choices on migration, things like tough choices on visa processing on boats, as well as things like welfare for children and welfare for senior people, what's called the winter fuel allowance. And these are all things that a lot of boffins in the Treasury are effectively saying, like, these things need to happen. They're very unpopular things. Keir Starmer's believing he's in for a 5-year term because that's how long the terms are in the UK. But they became so unpopular that Keir eventually had this kind of reverse Midas touch. Wherever he touched turned to crap. People just got so unhappy with him. And this is happening at the same time as Nigel Farage in Reform were ascending in the polls. Farage, the architect of Brexit, a lot of Australians will remember him as. He basically was leading as both the preferred Prime Minister, and Reform was polling were an election to be held for like basically anywhere in the past sort of 6 to 12 months in the UK. Reform would have won on those polling numbers. So the Labor Party felt it desperately needed a change. It's gone back to basically the only popular Labor politician in the country, which is Andy Burnham, who's come from Manchester. He is now so popular, has so much popular support with inside the MPs in the Labor Party that only he has the numbers to mount to basically go through this challenge. If you want a challenge to be Labor leader, you need 81 MPs to support you. There are about 450-odd MPs in the Labor Party, or 451 MPs. He has so many that no one else could reach 81. So he has universal support. No one can challenge him. It's effectively a coronation now. So on the 17th, he'll become leader, and then on the 20th, he'll be sworn in as PM.
And when will he hold an election? Because he would want a mandate, wouldn't he?
He's not going to hold an election. There's no way.
Wow.
Similar to just like how the Conservatives never did it when you had Cameron to May to Boris to Rishi to Truss. Like they never held an election after they went ninth when I was Prime Minister. A bit like, how when Turnbull knifed Abbott and then Gillard knifed Rudd and then Rudd knifed their back. They didn't hold elections. They were, it's kind of like a national sport that, Australia and the UK share, right? Is knifing prime ministers. Andy Burnham has a bit of a mandate. People know what he's about. He's no stranger to Westminster politics. He's been in the Tony Blair government. He's been in the Gordon Brown government, and he's also been in Starmer's sort of party as well. And he was supporting them from the Manchester mayoralty, but he's no stranger. People know what he's about, and so don't expect an election anytime soon.
Isn't it interesting, because you talk about the Reform Party and Nigel Farage, who has resigned as an MP, and I'll get you to explain what all that's about, because you mentioned the polling and Pauline Hanson and One Nation braining it in the polls here in Australia, and she has caught both sides of government, both the Conservatives and Labor, completely by surprise, and they're both trying to scratch out a new game plan. What happened to Nigel Farage when he was enjoying so much popularity?
So Nigel Farage has had this amazing ability, a bit like Boris Johnson and definitely like Donald Trump, as they kind of defy political gravity. Scandals just bounce off them and sometimes even make people like them more because they're seen as this outsider against the establishment. They're kind of sticking up the fingers to the establishment. So, if he has a rich friend who's earning money here or whatever, it kind of just slides off. If he's pursuing some politics that some might think are extreme rubbing politics or has some, more contemptible views to perhaps the left-wing side of the electorate, it doesn't really affect him. The problem is that Nigel Farage has gone from having a lot of rich friends that he said were just people donating him gifts.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it seems like it's going to be a lot more than that. So people, like there was a £5 million, so effectively $10 million donation from a Thai crypto billionaire that he received, or a gift, I should say, he received in the days leading up to him nominating himself to become an MP. You have to basically declare any gifts of such nature for the 12 months leading up to you nominating yourself as an MP on a public register in the UK. So people then know, okay, well, if Nigel Farage wants to pursue crypto reform, then we've got a giant £5 million crypto reform donation on there. We can at least know where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. But he didn't register this on his interests. He said it was a gift. He came in. There's a second thing. One of his closest political allies, this guy known around Westminster as Posh George, an aristocrat that is domiciled in Montenegro, owns a casino there, and has been saying, I'm giving Nigel Farage all this money, but it's just gifts. We're just friends. We're close. But it turns out he's been handing out business cards with reform stickers and George's name on it as well. It's, He's actually been having emails and had access to a lot of Nigel Farage's office. So there's basically what's happened is there was a parliamentary, and this is really another bit, there's been a parliamentary standards investigation into Nigel Farage now. So instead of just dealing with the media and having to bounce off it, it's the mechanisms of Westminster that now he has to battle. Now, what happens if the worst possible thing happens with this standards investigation? What happens? Nigel Farage there then has to be a by-election in his seat. So why would Nigel Farage call a by-election now? Well, if he does this, it resets the counter on all those gifts and donations.
Right.
An investigation would never have to take place. So then he has then styled himself, yes, as this kind of, it's me versus the establishment. Westminster's out to get me as well. I'm going to hold this by-election now and sort of be a bit too clever by half and jump in to sort of avoid this standards investigation, because that, in his mind, would reset the timer on things. It might not work that way when it gets down to the nitty-gritty. The investigation may continue, but it gives him a bit more political sort of life.
Yeah.
It lets him reset and retake control of the agenda when Andy Burnham, this incoming Labor Prime Minister, was kind of dominating the agendas. He then sort of escalates the crisis. He then is on the front foot again. That's the reason why. That's the sort of the reasoning behind this resigning to run in the seat you already own. For Nigel Farage. The problem is that none of the other major parties want a bar of this. They're not standing any candidates in Clacton, which is Nigel Farage's electorate. So the Labor, the Lib Dems, the Greens, Restore, which is the party to the right of reform, the Conservatives, none of them are running candidates. So Nigel Farage finds himself running against the perpetual long-running joke in British politics, which is this comedian chap called Count Binface, which is actually a bloke with a bin on his head.
Jonathan Harvey. He's a satirical comedian.
He is. So, yeah, sorry to spoil anyone at home who wanted to keep the myth of Count Binface alive, but yes,
Count
he is
Binface.
a satirical comedian. He is a writer on a lot of famous political shows. So if you're familiar with The Thick of It, if you're familiar with a lot of these other sort of British comedies, he actually is a accredited writer on them. And his sort of goal here, he ran against Andy Burnham up in Manchester. He ran against Keir Starmer. He's running against Nigel Farage here. It's kind of just to hold a mirror up to British politics and show how absurd it is. And now, because no one really pays him much of attention, he's kind of just a sideshow. But now, because you only have two candidates effectively running in this, which is Count Binface and Farage, then he has to be given attention. And to make things even more crazy and stupid, you'll love this, the broadcast regulator in the UK, the watchdog, it says that if you're having a two-horse race or a three-horse race, EVs have to give equal weighting and timing to these candidates.
Yes.
So you can't just dismiss this guy. Now, whether the regulator actually follows this up, probably not going to happen. But it means that if you're going to follow your code of ethics, you can't just dismiss this fool with a bin on his noggin. You've actually got to give him the light of day. So he's on BBC Newsnight, standing there cracking jokes, and then everyone has to treat it as normal. It's like everyone's the straight man and he's the comedian. It is an absurd situation. Nevertheless, that is the position Nigel Farage now finds himself in. And to make it crazier, Reform is currently fighting a by-election to win the mayoralty that Andy Burnham, this presumptive PM, has just... And so Reform wants to take that council. Now that this stunt has happened, the internal polling must look pretty bad, because Reform is sending out leaflets to all its volunteers. Hey, forget Manchester. Come down here to Clacton. We need to door knock, hand out leaflets to beat Count Binface. That's how serious this is, because a lot of people don't like Nigel Farage. Sure, they might, not like other politicians, but when it's just you, a polarizing person, versus effectively that middle finger to the rest of the establishment, people might just vote for this bin for the sake of it. So it's really an absurd situation that's been caused by a raft of different elements, with just the comedy of it and this serious investigation behind it. And the worst thing about this is, even if Farage wins, this investigation might resume. And should they find against Farage, well, that will spark a new by-election in the seat we've just had a by-election for. So wrap your brain around that.
It's a circus. And the parallels I draw to Australian politics. Number one, Pauline Hanson going to jail 2003 for electoral fraud. And she claims that she was taken out of the political race by Howard and Abbott. And she was sent to jail. And those allegations were false. She was eventually acquitted of all the charges. But she went to jail. And then it's kind of also like Norman Gunston running against Pauline Hanson. It's a satirical actor, a comedian, Running.
No, the historical parallel is absolutely there, isn't it?
Isn't it amazing?
That's just a life. It's like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and this is one of those occasions.
It is just unbelievable. Now, Prince Harry. Do we still call him Prince Harry?
We certainly do. He's not Prince Andrew, or not the former Prince Andrew. No. He's still Prince Harry.
Okay.
Still a royal.
Okay, but he's not a working royal, but he's back in the UK. Now, there are so many levels to this because he lost that massive defamation case against the Daily Mail and lack of evidence. And if you look at even both sides of the argument, it probably never should have gone to court. But anyway, he lost. So there was that headline, but the other headline we got back here in Australia is, will there, won't there be a reunion, a kumbaya moment between Prince Harry and His Royal Highness, his father, the King? And then, if he does go to the UK, and he has, who was going to pay for his security, which is another thing. Can you take us through this?
Yeah, this is certainly a saga. So we'll pick up on one point there, which you began with, which is that Prince Harry is no longer a working royal. He and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan, have pulled back from royal life and royal duty.
They wanted privacy. They wanted privacy, and then made so much publicity about them wanting their privacy. It was unbelievable.
It is absurd. Not as absurd as this by-election, but there are certainly absurdities in this case as well. Nevertheless, once you relinquish these royal duties, the royal family, the government, the Home Office here, they take away a lot of your security, this top-level security they're given by...
It's funded by the taxpayer.
Officers. It is funded by the taxpayer. So Harry employs his own security that he takes everywhere with him. But the problem is that they aren't able to take lethal weapons with them. That's Harry's argument. He's like, I have these terrorists after me. I have these lunatics after me. I want the guards with me to be able to carry lethal weapons. That's why he's in this big battle. He sees it as a stitch-up. The men in grey suits, as he puts them in, as he describes them, with these people at the palace that are pulling the strings, that hold a grudge against him because in his mind he told everyone what was going on in the palace, and so they resent him for it. In the classic words of late Majesty Queen Elizabeth, recollections may vary on this topic. Nevertheless, he wants to come back to the UK. He's done so before, but he wants to bring his family, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan, as well as their two children, Prince Archie, Prince Lilibet. And he says, I'm not bringing them back unless I have security. He then announces that he and the family are coming. So everyone assumes that these security issues must have been solved. But in the week prior to his arrival, we then learn, or it then comes out, after he's announced the entire family's coming, that all of a sudden the security is not there. And so we're left with this, well, are they coming? Will they not come? Harry then arrives. We learn that his family is not staying in London whilst they're here for security purposes. So they're here, but they're outside in private accommodation outside London. Harry was offered Buckingham Palace because it's a secure location. He says he accepted it. Buckingham Palace says actually he didn't accept it in time, and then so he was left in limbo as well.
I'm sure Buckingham Palace has got
rooms.
I'm sure Buckingham Palace has got a few spare rooms.
Only 775. So maybe there wasn't space. Who amongst us hasn't had room to house a guest at one moment or another? Nevertheless, he had to find his own accommodation. So then there is this, will they, won't they meet with the king? And if you're going to bring Meghan and the kids, then that means, according to his security officers, they have to meet outside of London. So then he goes up to meet them at Highgrove finally on Saturday in the UK. A short meeting, Harry, Meghan, the kids, the king and Queen Camilla. Very interesting that Queen Camilla was there as well, because Harry is scathing of the Queen in his book Spare. He basically blames her for a lot of the ills that have gone on in his life with his, the adultery between his mother and father. And obviously she was involved in that. And so you can understand why there, is no love lost between the pair of them, particularly with what Harry's then said. Nevertheless, they're meeting again because Charles had not seen his grandchildren since he was still the Prince of Wales, since the late Queen Elizabeth II was still alive. So it's been 4 years. That's now happened. Then he's basically leaving the country now, back to California. But it has been a circus because every day he's had something booked. Spontaneously, Prince William and Princess Kate have then announced something that they're doing. And the King's also had something that they're doing. So all these little houses, Buckingham Palace, the House of Sussex, and then the Waleses, they're all competing for these headlines, and they're all as bad as one another, in my view.
Well, it's taken the royal focus off Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew. So what is the latest with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Is he off the hook? Is the microscope still on him?
Definitely not.
Are there more charges?
No, definitely not.
What's the latest?
It's actually, we actually have some recent news on this. So it was just this week where Metropolitan Police officers, as well as police officers from other jurisdictions around the UK, where some of these allegations against the former prince are said to have occurred, are actually heading to the United States to then interview people, speak with US officials, and also interview the family of Andrew's late accuser, Virginia Giuffre, as well, and speak to them. Now, there is Andrew very much has no more titles left. He's been put up at Marsh Farm, sequestered away out of sight, out of mind for the rest of the royal family. They've effectively pushed every sanction onto him that they can. But in the background, we're still going to have years of this police investigation going. The problem is that US officials, depending on the paper you read, say are not happy or interested at all in helping out the British police investigation. Why? Because a lot of this is tied up with Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are theorizing that, well, because Donald Trump is so tied up with Epstein, were we to get unredacted copies of all of these files, which Andrew's name is like ubiquitous throughout all of them, that would reveal information that would become very sensitive for the current US administration. So the US is not playing nice with the UK. It might have to get to the stage where the UK police has to take some part of the US to court. You'd have to imagine they probably, given how diplomatically sensitive it is, they wait until there's a new US administration. That's 2.5 years away before the end of Trump's term. That's if he ends in 2 terms. He could go on, with how ambitious he is. So we are very much not done with Andrew. There is a long way to go with that. Currently, investigations ongoing, no charges, but still he is at the centre of several police investigations here.
You would think just the very fact that they can now almost, beyond a shadow of a doubt, prove that he'd asked a police officer, a protection officer, to get dirt on Virginia Giuffre and provided him with her contact details, social security number and everything, which is illegal. And the fact that he has leaked sensitive trade information to Epstein while he was a trade envoy on the taxpayer coin, and having prostitutes and massages and golf. And I mean, it just beggars belief. But his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, where is she? How did she survive when she was the Duchess of York? They were divorced, but she was offering businessmen, they were offering her bribes, cash, all caught on camera for an audience with her husband. And how did she even survive that?
Yeah, I mean, they are. I'm reluctant to use the word sort of cockroach in their survivability because it has some pretty uncouth connotations. But for people like this, with friends with Jeffrey Epstein, I suppose the comparison is apt. They are, particularly the Duchess of York, or the former Duchess of York, extremely adept in schmoozing, having friends, particularly friends in jurisdictions and places where ethical standards are not as high as you might get in the West or in the Anglosphere. We're talking about Gulf nations, places like this where they still have quite a bit of wealth. They can still sort of do favours for people. That's how they keep their heads above water. Sarah Ferguson is effectively skint now, though. At times she was hiding out in Australia. At times she's been around Switzerland. She's been in the UK as well, but she's really keeping her way outside of the media. I'm sure the palace is putting extraordinary pressure on the pair of them to keep them outside of the spotlight as well. But the question you originally asked me, I believe, was how, as a charge is not being pressed, we have this information here ready. Surely that would be enough.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to, I'm not exactly a legal scholar. This is not Ben Downie KC weighing in on this. But when you have a treasure trove of documents like this and you're going to use that as evidence, you don't want to then have a trial, the prince or the former prince use his legal arm that he can still afford to fight you tooth and nail, and then have certain things ruled in and then ruled out. I mean, you try to use these same documents in the subsequent trial for something else that might come up in these files a year down the track. Then all of a sudden, when you go to trial again, you can have that stuff struck off. It was then not proven at the time that was, materially impactful, and for whatever charge you might have tried to get on the first time, so then they can't introduce it the second time. You kind of have to go big and go home, and so they're going to get all their ducks in a row. Because if you are the Metropolitan Police or Thames Valley Police or any of these services that would prosecute either of them for these supposed crimes that these documents
do hint at might have taken place, it would be the most significant police investigation effectively in the history of the royal family, taking them to court in something like this. So the margin for error, the margin for doing anything that is not every T crossed and I dotted is zero. So they are going to do it once and do it perfect. That's what they're going to try to do. So that's why this process is taking so long.
Yeah, getting their ducks in a row, or on this occasion, their wood ducks in a row.
Very good.
That's okay. You can use that. I'm a big subscriber to BBC News, and they're now saying that obviously Prince Andrew claimed he was at the Pizza Express in Woking on March 10, 2001, and that to serve as an alibi against the allegations by Virginia Giuffre. However, they now have almost definitive proof that he was never there. What's the story there?
That will definitely come into whatever sort of case is then put against Prince Andrew. There are times as well where he says, I wasn't hanging out with Jeffrey this time, and all of a sudden he's photographed in New York living in
Central Park.
There are times when he's saying, like, I wasn't talking to these people, or I'd never had a relationship with these people. I'd cut off contact with them. And then we get the email chain from, Prince Andrew or the Duke or any other of his pseudonyms talking to these people for years after the fact that he cut off contact. There is inconsistency after inconsistency after inconsistency. They will all be part of the eventual case that's brought against him. This one with the Pizza Express is only the latest.
It's unbelievable. And that email, saying we're in this together, let's let it blow over, and then once again we can have some fun. I mean, when you look at the fun that Jeffrey Epstein had, it's just so poor. How is this affecting their daughters?
Yeah, well, Beatrice and Eugenie, the princesses, King Charles is being extraordinarily protective of them. There is very much a view inside the palace that they had nothing to do with this, that they are basically the victim of circumstance. I don't know how much of a victim of circumstance you can be if you're part of the aristocracy, but that's a question for a different time. But effectively, the king still invites them to public events. When they have Christmas up at Sandringham, he wants them and their husbands front and centre. When they're going to Royal Ascot, he wants them in the royal carriages. If at any time the king can make sure and publicly show that they are still part of the fold, a part of the firm, he wants to do this. Now, not everyone has that view. A lot of people rightfully ask the question, well, this isn't a period of offending that only went on in the late 90s and early aughts when you were young and naive. This is a period of supposed offending, alleged offending, we must say, that are taking place in the 2010s, and still contact and things come up in the 2020s. Like, you're very much adults now. Were you putting your fingers in your ear and closing your eyes? Like, how much should you have known? And to what extent, particularly when it comes to crimes against minors, like in Australia, if you have any information about crimes committed against a minor, it's an offence to withhold the information.
Yeah.
So, it's not just the fact of like, was it ignorance or was it willful ignorance? That's very much the question that's being posed, rightfully so. But in the palace, they're still very protective of both princesses.
Oh, God, what a place to live, Ben Downie. And I've got to ask you about the World Cup. Soccer was invented in England. It's England's game. They last won the FIFA World Cup back in 1966, and the pressure since then has been enormous. Tell me, what's the atmosphere like? England's 2-1 extra time victory over Norway, so now England has Georgia on its mind. Tell me all about that and the feeling and the atmosphere.
So I was at a pub last night into the early hours watching that. And the vibe in the pub is very much, it's coming home, as the Brits like to say. That it's very jubilant. You have this heroic performance by like their talismanic player, Jude Bellingham, that gets them over the line. It is a very together group, which in the past, these England groups, all these stars of the Premier League are at one another's throats. They kind of hate one another, but they begrudgingly play for the team. Unlike now, they're very much like a tight-knit team, a team that's had some flashes of brilliance. But as ever, even though the national mood might be one of optimism, the mood inside the British press is, as ever, extraordinarily pessimistic. There are questions being asked of Thomas Tuchel, the manager, last night, questions being asked of Jude Bellingham, their best player, trying to pit one player against another. They're saying, okay, you're winning, the results on paper look good, but the performances aren't convincing. You're not playing as, courageous or swashbuckling as we might like to see. On paper, you have this amazing roster, but it's not reflected on the field. Why are you not doing better? When we eventually come up against Argentina, where Lionel Messi is playing for in the next round, or should we make the final either Spain or France, we're going to get destroyed because Spain, particularly France, look absolutely devastating. And so there is optimism they might get through the semis into the final, but I don't think a lot of people think that they will win the final. But really, there is so much else going on at this tournament. They're playing last night at a stadium that felt like 42 degrees on the pitch. They just finished the time earlier playing at the Azteca in Mexico in seriously high altitude.
Yeah.
This team has gone through a grueling physical test as much as it is a mental test, with the enormous weight of expectation on, close to a century, 80 odd years of history on their shoulders as well. So look, at the moment, we're fresh off a win. The mood is high, but as ever, countdown, as the days count down, the hours count down to this match against Argentina, it will become pessimistic. Pessimism, what the Brits do best.
You never know. But can you, Ben, I'll let you go. But can you explain something to me? And I will plead ignorance. I'm a dumbass and I don't understand it. Does the English football team represent the whole of the United Kingdom? My reason for that is the Prime Minister is Prime Minister of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Is the English football team representing the whole of the UK, or is it just England? Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, I can. No, the English football team just represents England. So inside the United Kingdom, you have effectively all the Welsh, all the Scots, and all the people in Northern Ireland. Last night, they all felt Norwegian. 4 days ago, they were all Mexican. 4 days ago, before that, they were all from the Democratic Republic of Congo. They all want these blokes to lose. And yes, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he's actually a really big football fan, and so is Andy Burnham, his incoming Prime Minister. They very vocally support England, but everyone else wants them to lose. Rugby fans or listeners right now might be aware of the Six Nations, which is a rugby tournament. There was this famous ad that basically had all the different supporters shouting for England, because in the Six Nations, kind of like in this, it doesn't matter who you want to win, it matters who you want to lose. And they want England to lose desperately. So don't worry, you walk over the border into Scotland in 4 days' time, and everyone in every Scottish pub is going to be wearing a Messi shirt, guaranteed.
So Scotland has its own FIFA football team, and yet everyone talks about England. Explain Scotland.
Yeah, so Scotland are a great case. They've made the World Cup for the first time since the 90s this year because of this expanded tournament. Scotland went over with all their amazing fans and their tartan and their bagpipes to Boston. That's where all of their fixtures were.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how, like, St. Patrick's Day is this effectively 4th of July in Boston, and all the Irish over there love drinking. Well, the Scots apparently drank 3 to 4 times the amount of beer during that period than all the local Bostonians did during St. Patrick's Day. So they put on an absolute show for everyone there. Everyone loved them. Tragically, Scotland, I think, scored only maybe 1 goal in 4 matches there. It wasn't a very, they weren't covered in glory when they made a sort of embarrassing exit from the tournament. To answer your question more broadly as well, Ireland, Northern Ireland and Wales also all have teams that just didn't qualify for the World Cup.
Okay, that's why the tensions. Can you believe it? Scotland went to Boston and drank the place dry. Unbelievable. It's
like be patriotic for a nation I don't even belong to.
Ben Downie, you know what? You get the greatest job. You get to go to a pub, watch the World Cup, and it's all work. It's all in the name of research.
Oh, you couldn't put it on the expenses or corporate cards, sadly, but look, it's still pretty good. I'm very lucky.
Hey, listen, you talk to your tax man. I bet there's a way around it. Keep your receipts. Keep your receipts. Ben Downie, we'll see you on Channel 7. Thank you so much. Gee, we've covered some ground. I'll let you go. You got a file for Channel 7, but I really appreciate your time. And can we talk again sometime soon?
Yeah, pleasure. And absolutely. You got my number.
Ben Downie in the UK, in London, in a pub. Truckie Tuesday is up next, and it's all made possible thanks to GME, the Aussie experts in communication tech for over 65 years. 10-4, good buddies. Whether you're passing vital road info onto the convoy, calling out a hazard ahead, or telling old mate to get off Channel 40 because it ain't a bloody karaoke bar, GME's got the gear to keep your connection steady and crystal clear. Truckie Tuesday. It's time for another Truckie Tuesday. It is Truckie Tuesday number... Rod Hannifey, it's Truckie Tuesday number 124. Unbelievable.
Well done.
Rod Hannifey is with us. Where are you today, Rod?
Oh, mate, I'm out in the yard at Dubbo getting some work done on the truck, and I've got to help my daughter move on the weekend. So I arranged it all so I could be here, and work made that happen. So
well,
much appreciated.
You might see in the background a tail wagging or a face of a dog. We are house sitting my son's dog. We've got Kelsey's dog, Riley, and last week we had 3 for a while. It's a zoo. It's chaos. It's chaos. But hey, listen, we're off to the casino truck show. It's official.
Yes, looking forward to it, mate.
Yep, 31st of July to the 1st of August. If you want to read more, all the links are in our description. We also have a very special guest on the podcast today. It is Tony Crook, who is the Group Marketing Manager, with very special people, GME, who, Rod, you put us onto. You're a massive fan.
Mate, they've been a sponsor of mine for many, many years, probably 15 years now in total, from when I started the Truck Ride Industry Vehicle Project. Mate, I use their products every day that I'm in the truck, and they've certainly supported me, and I think that they provide an ideal thing to improve safety on the road. Like anything, some things that can be abused. We get idiots on the radio in Melbourne and they can't stop that, but they can save lives, and they've certainly helped us prevent accidents from where I sit, mate.
Well, back in my early panel operator days at 2GB in the late 70s, on Saturdays we had a thing called Three-Way Turf Talk with Johnny Tapp, Ken Callender and Damien Radler. So today it's Three-Way Truck Talk. And Tony Crook, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, mate. As I said, Group Marketing Manager with GME. And Kelsey was doing a bit of research. And on your LinkedIn profile, it says you're a bit of a podcaster as well. What's the story?
Oh, yeah. Well, I dabble. Actually, 2 years ago, I started my own little side project. So I've been at GME now for a bit over 10 years. Love the work that I do there. Love the industries that we are lucky enough to work with. But a couple of years ago, I decided that through all the work that I've done, I've met some pretty incredible people with some incredible stories, and the world needed to hear those stories. So I started the Outer Side podcast. So it's an outdoors podcast, and we just talk to people from across the outdoors spectrum that do cool things, and we're trying to motivate people to spend more time outside and less time inside in front of computer screens. So it's good fun.
It sounds like it. I'm going to have a listen, and we'll direct people to your podcast if that's okay. We'll cross-pollinate. But look, the thing that really impresses me, everyone talks about GME and your wide range of products, and they're Australian made. Now, we often talk about how we don't manufacture things in Australia anymore. I'll tell you who's a big fan of yours, Dick Smith.
Yes.
Well, I've had Dick Smith on the podcast, and he gives you guys a big rap.
We've had Smith come and visit our factory before, actually, as it were.
Tell us about GME, how it all started and what you're about. And Rod, please feel free to jump in.
Well, yeah, it's a long story and it predates me, but I'll give you the short version. So GME was founded by a gentleman called Ted Dunn in 1959, and the business started in a very entrepreneurial fashion. Ted identified an opportunity to repair television tuners. And at the time, a particular television tuner continued to fail, and there was really no viable economical way to repair them. So Ted sourced the parts from Japan, figured out how to fix them, and started doing it in his garden shed. Now, you fast forward 67 years to today, and the business looks very different to what it did back then. Ted, unfortunately, passed away quite some time ago, but his family are still the majority shareholders of the business.
They're keeping, as Lawsy would say, they're keeping the dream alive.
Oh, absolutely. And the legacy that Ted started continues to this day. So it's still a family-owned company, still 100% Australian, private-owned. And the business, as I said, has changed drastically from repairing television tuners to what we do now. And there's been a number of different sort of changing points within the business's history. But the most critical one that we can talk about today is in 1981.
Right.
And I'll give you a little tip. It was before I even existed. GME assembled their first UHF radio in 1981. And that really was the starting point for a dramatic shift in terms of the focus of our business to where we fast forward to today, and UHF CV radios are a huge part of our business. And within that, the heavy vehicle and trucking operators are a customer that we've been able to support since the early 1980s.
Well, we're really proud and flattered and honoured that you're part of the Bonafide Truckie Tuesday podcast. So thank you very much. But Rod, I'll let you take over because we get a lot of listener feedback, Tony, from truckies and caravanners who say people don't know how to use these things properly. There's an etiquette And there is a knowledge you need to know to get full benefit from this. Rod, I'll let you take over.
Back in the days, we had CV radios, 27 megahertz, and you might even heard that there were, pirates in those days because you were supposed to have a license for your CB. Eventually, they removed that requirement, and then I was actually calling a caravan on my way to Burke one day, and there were some offshore fishermen using these obviously illegal radios outside on the water. Now, I was at Burke. Now, that's a fair way from the water. And on Channel 8, I was nearly blown out of the cab. And that became such a problem that we virtually moved over to UHFs. And I think pretty much in the States, they've done the same. Of course, GME make marine UHF radios for people in boats. And as Tony said, it's not just us. It's farmers. And at one stage years ago when we had the 40 channel sets, and they were virtually going to make the 40 channel sets obsolete overnight when we went to 80 channels. Now, again, if you've got one radio in your truck, well, you go and buy a new one, that's not so bad. But if you're a farmer and you've got one in every machine and every ute and every house and every property, they were looking at buying 10 and 15 radios. And GME pretty much got behind that fight as well at the time. The 40-channel radios are still out there. We've now got 80-channel sets. And as I've said, mate, whilst there are some that abuse it and make it hard, and we complain about people sitting at home with nothing better to do than call up and rag truckies on and upset them, when you're on the highway, it can save a life. It can save an accident. It can warn somebody of something coming in front. And let alone it can mean, g'day, mate, how you going? The road's clear. Have a good night. So it covers a whole range of things. I got involved with the caravan community, and we now have Channel 18 as the RVers channel. It was the caravanners channel initially. And, of course, GME are right into that market as well. Yes, some people sort of buy it and sit it there. Of course, some turn it down because somebody abused them or got off and then they don't turn it back up. There's a couple of things there I suppose we might find a way to improve one day, Tony. But overall, the ability to help someone, to warn them of something in front, cannot be done without that radio contact.
Rod's one of those people that I'm always excited to hear from because Rod's got a lot of ideas. One of the things that I believe sets GME apart from many other manufacturers, and particularly the fact that we're Australian, we manufacture our radios in Australia, but we've also got our engineering design teams in Australia. And what that means is that when we get feedback from people like Rod who are using our products day in and day out, we can provide that feedback directly to our R&D and engineering teams, and we can bake that into future products, or if we've got updates coming out for products where we can change software to address those kinds of pieces of feedback, we can do that a lot faster than other brands, which I think is really important. That feedback loop that we have with customers like Rod, I think is so important. So whenever I see Rod's name pop up on my phone, I know that I'm in for a chat. It's probably going to be some loud background noise, and we're going to get some new ideas for some new products.
Listen, how do we combat the pests? Because that's common feedback too. I've worked in radio for 48 years, and we have to reply and report to ACMA.
Yes.
And there is a regulatory body there. What's the story with UHF and people who have too much time on their hands and they just want to be assholes? How do you combat that?
I can give you a short answer. You can't. The beauty of UHF CB in Australia is the fact that it is an open communication platform with no barriers. So the fact that you can roll into your local truck shop, you can buy a UHF CB radio, very easy to install in your vehicle, switch it on, no licensing, no nothing. You can communicate. And that's why it's been so popular since the 1980s in Australia. But with that freedom and that flexibility comes a personal responsibility not to be a jerk. And unfortunately, there's lots of different people in this world, and some have productive things to occupy themselves with, and others have got less productive things to occupy themselves with. It's definitely worse in the metro centres. So as soon as you get to a big city like Sydney or Melbourne, the silliness and the stupidity on the UHF escalates. And I think Rod could probably speak to that as well. The further you go out into the regional communities and get out into the country, I guess the more people rely on UHF out there for communication and safety, so they respect it and they know that how frustrating it is when someone's tying up a channel. If you're a caravaner and you're in convoy with some friends or family and you're just communicating while you're traveling along, if you're on a particular channel and someone gets on there and starts being a pest, you can just jump to another channel. That's not a problem. Where it does become an issue is those well-known and well-used channels, 18, the RV channel, 29, the Pacific Highway channel, 40, the National Highway channel. When someone's on one of those channels being a pest, it's very hard to just say, oh, we'll jump off 40, because many truckies, many four-wheel drivers like myself, many caravanners will monitor 40 because that's where the majority of the radio traffic is. You mentioned ACMA. So they set the standards for UHF CB radios. So they manage the spectrum for all RF in the country, and they set the standards, and we have to adhere to those standards. So that's all fine. The problem is there's no way of identifying an individual UHF CB radio set remotely. So if somebody's being a pest on the radio, there's no way of identifying who that person is. It's not like a VHF marine radio where you've got an MMSI programmed in and it identifies the user. Because UHF is so open as a communications platform, it means that it is untraceable, unfortunately. So it comes back to that same old thing that we talk about in so many aspects of life. Personal responsibility, right?
And common sense, but the thing about common sense is it isn't common. Now, back in the old days, when you needed a license to have a radio and a television, in metropolitan areas, they had vans with detector dishes on top that would drive around, and they knew if you were receiving a signal without a license, and they'd knock on your door. Now, obviously, that takes a lot of manpower and a lot of time and a lot of money to be spent. But isn't there something that can be done if somebody's just being a jerk?
I'd love to hear it.
Mate, as you say, when we were paying that licence, the government said, well, that money that was earned from the licence fee is where they paid those people to go out and find pirate people. Of course, what happened is it just exploded. Everybody ended up having a CB and they couldn't monitor it. There were still people who, back in those days could be traced, and you can follow the signal to a certain degree. There's a gentleman who lives at Parkes, reckon he had one of the first UHF radios in Australia, and he was telling me one day that there is some sort of a signal, but you've got to be able to track it. So you can imagine that if you've got some bloke sitting at home, he's gone and bought his UHF, he's got an aerial set up, and he just sits there and talks rot, unless you're going to pay somebody from the government. And again, if he says, it's a lovely day, and there used to be the bloke in Sydney that was the bumper car bloke, and he was a bit of fun for about 10 minutes. He was sort of carry on about the traffic on Paramount. Oh, we call him the bumper car bloke, but he was like an announcer at the bumper cars at the show.
Yeah.
And he'd say, Parramatta Road's a bit like this now, and he'd carry on. And as I say, it was really funny for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But after the fourth or fifth day, it started to wear a bit thin. And so he didn't actually abuse anybody. The other side to that is the blokes who get on, truck drivers are all bad eggs, etc., and it goes a lot worse than that. But, those people, you really wonder about their ability. And it's one thing if you're, sitting in the car talking to a mate, let's stir that truckie up and see what he says. But these people are sitting at home on their own, Luke, and they're virtually talking to themselves. And unless you bite, unless you respond, you really wonder about their mental capacity, but the benefit still outweighs the few idiots at the moment, and I think that's going to remain the case.
What was his name? The bumper guy. What was his name?
Oh, that was what I called him anyway.
What was his first name?
Oh, he never gave his name out, but he'd get on the radio and like, again.
He wanted his own. He wanted his own show. He was probably. I'm surprised he wasn't looking for sponsors. There was a bloke, when I lived in Bathurst, there was this bloke who applied many times for a job at the radio station, and we got him on the radio once, and he was just terrible, and he didn't find any more work. But he used to work at Big W or Woolies or one of them. Big W, I think it was. And he used to get on the microphone and he used to do his own radio show.
in the store.
In the store. There's a spillage in aisle 8, there's a spillage. And he would call, he would shout, he'd do Cheerios for people he recognised, you know.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I know. And he wouldn't shut up. Anyway.
Yes, and
anyway.
that's the lighter side of it, eh? Channel 40 has always been a call channel. You call up, and it depends on where you are and what sort of a night it is. Like, I've had some really deep and meaningful conversations and had other drivers chip in and make comments. And then I've said, "G'day, mate, how's it going? You know, how's it been? Oh, well, you get off the bloody channel, mate, you know." And look, I've got to say, my other love is audiobooks, and of course you're listening to an audiobook and you get someone comes on and they're rabbiting on about this, that and the other, and you think, well, you give it a rest. So the intent is that you call up, copy the northbound truck, mate, there's a cow on the road up there, have a good night. But if you want to go too much past that, you call him up and you say, mate, let's go to another channel. So you pick another channel. There are some that are still restricted. And like, I'm sure, Tony, you've never seen much of Crest anymore. Back in the day, Luke, we had a thing called Crest, Citizens Radio Emergency Service Teams.
Right.
So before we had mobile phones, they were people who sat at home and monitored Channel 5 as the emergency channel. And before you had a phone, you could be travelling down the highway, there could be an accident, so you couldn't pick your mobile up because you never had one then. And you'd get onto the radio and you'd call them and they'd get the police out for you. If there's a way that we can find to sort of, when you turn the phone on, it mutes the UHF without turning it off, because you turn it down and then you're driving along and you're thinking, geez, the road's quiet. Nobody said anything. Oh, damn, I turned it down and forgot. And that's what happens with the caravanners too. And back to that day I was going out to Burke, I got halfway around this caravan and then they've called me up on Channel 40 and he said, "Oh, you're right to come round, mate." I said, "Well, it's a bit late now. I'm halfway there." And I said, "Well, I didn't know you had a radio, mate. Why haven't you got a sign on it?" "Oh, we're on Channel 23. I said, "Well, that's really nice. Do you know who else is on 23? "Oh, we don't know. We thought it was a good channel." I said, "Well, I don't know that." So that's the importance of having a sign on your caravan, front and rear, to let us know that you're on channel and what channel you're on so we can call you up. But if they've turned it down, we can't get to them.
Okay, it might sound ironic, but it's about communication. Yeah. It's all about communication. The only Australian manufacturer of CB and UHF radios, where do you manufacture them? Where's the factory? Tell us about the people that build these wonderful things.
I'd absolutely love to. We build the vast majority of our UHF CB radios, not all of them, it's worth pointing that out, in Winston Hills, which is in northwestern Sydney. So we have a purpose-built facility. We built the facility and moved in 2013. So we've had various factories around Sydney over the years, and as the business has grown, we've scaled. But I guess it's really an indication of how committed the family that owns GME is, that they are willing to invest such a large amount of money to purchase the land and build a purpose-built headquarters and factory in 2013. So when so many other businesses are moving offshore and are producing their goods in other countries around the world because of lower labour costs and all of those things that are very real commercial considerations, the owners of GME said, "No, we're going to double down and we're going to invest a huge sum of money to continue to manufacture in Australia." So rather than taking, dare I say it, the easier option to offshore and reduce your 500%, the owners of GME said, "No, we're going to get better at this and we're going to be more efficient by building a purpose-built facility in Sydney to enable us to continue manufacturing radios in Australia." The family have indicated on a number of occasions, if we can't make radios in Australia anymore, they'll shut the doors.
Wow.
It's a great source of pride for our business.
Yeah, I bet.
Last financial year, which just wrapped up, nearly 90% of our total revenue comes out of our factory in Sydney, Australia, which is quite unusual in this day and age.
Can I just say that is something to be so proud of, and the temptation to go overseas where components might be cheaper, where the labour certainly is cheaper. It must have been so tempting to say, let's pick up and go overseas like so many other people do. And from a financial point of view, I get it. But that is, as Sir Humphrey Appleby would say in Yes Minister, that's incredibly courageous.
Yes, definitely. Well, I'm not sure if anyone watching on the video, you can see we've got this little kangaroo on the flag of my shirt. And that little logo, the Australian Made campaign, is something that's so important. It's more than just a little kangaroo logo. It's it means so much to our business and to the owners of our business, but to the employees as well, because what it means is GME is supporting local jobs. We're supporting local youth who are interested in engineering and developing their skill sets. And it's a much bigger picture. So we have around 250 employees in GME nationally.
Wow.
Nearly half of them work in our manufacturing facility. We've got 50 engineers that work in our facility in Sydney. So when we say we manufacture in Australia, it's end to end, from the initial spark of an idea that might come from Rod when he's on some lonely highway late at night. Writes me a message, into our R&D, engineering, manufacturing, and then obviously over to my side of the business, to the sales and marketing team, to get the message out there. We ship it out of Sydney to our customers and away we go. So it's an end-to-end Australian business, which is something that we're all so proud of.
Let me go a little bit sideways here, but I reckon, Tony and Rod, you'll appreciate this. We often look at what farmers get at the farm gate for their produce, and what Woolies and Coles, who have the duopoly in Australia, 82% of supermarket retail, what they sell it for. And the farmers are always saying, gee whiz, milk, anything that's made on an Australian farm. So I have put it out there that either Coles or Woolies or both have a green and gold aisle, and it's called the Oz aisle. And everything in that aisle is manufactured, grown, and owned here in Australia.
I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. And I'll share a little secret with you. There's actually a Facebook group called Australian Made Products. I don't know who runs it. It's got nothing to do with us. There's 185,000 members on that page. And what happens on that page is people say, hey, I've found this product. These are all the common ones. These are the popular ones. They all come from overseas, but I found this one, and this one's Australian made. It's Australian owned. You should support this. And it's really interesting to see the community get behind those products.
Kelsey wanted me to ask you this, and it's a good question. We all know 10-4 Good Buddy, thanks to the song Convoy. And Rod, what's your location? Is that a 1020?
1020, yes.
See, I remember that. But can we go through some of the abbreviations that are used on the UHF?
Over to you, Rod.
The 10 code virtually has disappeared, and that was a CB thing. Yeah, look, it very rarely do you hear anything like that. Yeah, well, we don't even have the, what is it, BTW, like it because it's not always
Thunderbirds had FAB, Scotty.
They did.
They had FAB.
I'm trying to find out what it was, and we still don't agree, do we?
Anyway, keep going.
So, look, the thing is, because you're in the truck, you've got a mic. And you've got to pick it up and use it. And look, at one stage, the police wanted to outlaw UHF radios. And they said, it's a hazard and that sort of thing. And, of course, they don't like you telling someone that the coppers parked down the bottom of the hill or around the corner. And honestly, I think that they were doing it for that reason more than any other.
A bear.
Yeah, bear, yeah. So we don't call them bears here. We call them double ones. Double one is the police car, or an Evel Knievel. We still use that one occasionally.
Okay.
But look, the thing is that if you've got a phone, and we all know that it's illegal to hold your phone, and yet how often do we see people doing it on their laps and avoiding the cameras? With a CB or UHF radio, you can listen passively. It's there, it's turned on, you don't have to touch it to hear a truck driver call another truck driver up and say, mate, are you aware there's a tree down 2K up the road? Or are you aware of that accident in front of you? You hear that. You don't have to touch it to listen. But yes, we'd like people to understand that little bit of etiquette. You call up. You can't just say copy in the white truck. That's like saying 20 years ago, copy in the Holden, because 1 in 3 was a Holden. You've got to say copy the white truck heading southbound towards Dubbo. Mate, can you tell me how the road is, or something like that? They've got to be a little bit more specific. They don't need to be scared of the radio. You're not going to get points, or you're not going to get a fine for not being, copy the white truck. But don't be scared of it. It can save your life. And if you do the right thing, most people will give you a fair go.
A UHF isn't just an accessory. It's a lifeline. It's exactly why I'm stoked to have GME on the Bonafide podcast. They're the only Australian manufacturer of UHF CB radios and emergency beacons, operating right out of a purpose-built HQ in Sydney. You want to know how many locals they keep in steady work? 250. And the gear they build doesn't just keep the Bonafide family safe on the road. It's engineered specifically to handle the bull dust, the corrugations, and the longest hauls you can throw at it. If you love Truckie Tuesday, back the brand that backs us. Head over to gme.net.au. That's gme.net.au. Links are in the description. Let's get back to the chat.
Not being scared of the UHF is as important as being respectful when you are using it. So it's really just having a strong understanding of the right, just the etiquette that we should all be using. And that applies for just your life in general. I don't think you don't have to speak differently on a UHF to how you speak to someone when you're face to face with them, just to be polite and respectful. But the beauty of UHF for me is the fact that, as Rod said, you can talk to any road user. Obviously, they need to have a UHF in the vehicle, but being able to call up a truckie or call up a caravanner. And I've had experiences myself where we were going up Thunderbolt's Way and this caravan in front of me, every time he took off, the door would swing open and then he'd stop and the door would swing up. So he didn't, but his door was coming open. And I just called him up on the radio and said, "Hey, mate, you got a copy with the Jayco?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Your door's open. You might want to shut it on your van." "Oh, thanks, mate." Pulls over and shuts his door. It's those little moments where no one was going to die. No one was at risk. I mean, the caravan door was at risk. He might have had an open plan caravan if he'd clipped something with it. But it's that ability to be able to talk to absolute strangers on the road and check in. Is it safe to pass?
Yeah.
Is the caravan door open? All of those little moments in time, I think, help road users be connected. And that's something that I know Rod is really passionate about, as I guess truckies in a lot of respects are not the stewards of the roads, but you know what I mean? They're always present. You can be on the most remote, lonely road late at night, and 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to see a truckie out there doing his job too.
Now, Rod, you know our music man, Jono?
Yes.
Tony, Jono is our music man.
Okay.
And he's a listener from way back. And he makes tunes for us, right? And he sent one in, and it's called She's Gotta Look Right. Now, would you like a listen?
Now, mate, you missed a bit. You know it's gonna get dirty on the way there. Yeah, I know. Still gotta look right. Yeah. Friday off of the week is done. Park her up, but we ain't done. Bucket and rag hose on the go. One more polish on the chrome. Mom calls out, you coming inside. 5 more minutes, 3 hours fly. One last wipe and we're ready to go. She's gotta look right for casino. She's gotta look right when we roll in. Wash her down and make that chrome grill. Sheds lit up and the radio on. Everybody getting ready to roll. Mom's packed the bags, kids by the door. Dad's found another bloody thing to do. One more wipe and we're ready to go. She's gotta look right for casino.
Woo! Ah! Jono, sensational stuff. Tony, your thought? This is like Red Faces on Hey Hey. What did the judges say, Tony?
I'm going to be brutally honest here. I'm not much of a country music fan, so that's probably erring towards a genre that I don't participate in. But however, I love the message and I love the content, so I give it a 8 out of 10.
Okay, Rocket Rod.
Yes, and Jono sent it to me as well. So I was listening on the way out to work this morning. Mate, it's one of those things, it's probably the last thing in our industry where you get together. The truck shows, like many years ago, we had truck drivers clubs. Most of those have disappeared. I'm sure there was one at Casino at one stage. But these sort of events where we get together, look, you get out of the truck, you talk to your mates, you polish it up, you make it look good, and you go over you solve the industry's problems, as we wish we could every day, and then you go back to work the next day. And look, some blokes put so much effort into it. They got the whole family, they're in under cleaning the truck and making it look nice. And it's one time where we get the public to come along and talk to us. On the road, unless they've got a UHF, we don't get to talk to them. In the roadhouses, you're sitting there having a meal, you don't get to talk to them. But we get the public to come and see the trucks, to talk to the drivers, to see us as people.
some of the things that you were talking about there really resonated with me around humanising truckies. And it's something that I've been lucky enough now. I've been a GME for 10 years. I've met a lot of truckies over the years. I've been to the truck shows. I've talked to these guys, and I have a lot of respect for the work you do. It's hard. It's lonely. It's long hours. We understand the mental health challenges that so many truckies experience because of that isolation. But humanising the man or the woman inside of the truck to the community at large, I think, is so important, because the general population often, trucks are loud, they're noisy, that one was tailgating me, or he pulled out on me, or there's a bit of a perception that truckies are out to get everybody, and it's absolutely not the case. And I think what you said there about they don't understand what's going on behind the curtain. It's like, yeah, that's your food. That's the nappies for your baby. That's the supplies you need for your business, or that's
it's the fuel for your car.
It's everything in Australia, and I love it. The line that has been around for so long: without trucks, Australia stops, and it's true. So I think people need to understand not only are the goods inside the truck for them, but the person operating that vehicle is a person with a family just like them. The difference between the person operating the truck and the person outside it is the person outside it is probably going to go home to their family and spend a night in their bed tonight, whereas the truckie, 9 times out of 10, he's going to be sleeping on the side of the road somewhere, or he's going to have to be worrying about when he's going to load and unload to get up the next day. So I think all of us in the community need to really just take a step back and remind ourselves the importance of truck drivers in this country.
Tony Crook, absolutely spot on. Gee, I got to tell you, Rod, how long have you and I been doing this? Would it be 8 years, 9 years?
I'll be getting close to that now, mate. Yeah.
I have learned so much, and my whole attitude when I hit the freeway is completely different. And you know what? It isn't hard to adjust. Rod, before we jump into hot topics, a message for Jono to appease the Tony Crooks of this world and the Luke Boners. Rod, I know you love Driving Wheels by Jimmy Barnes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love Ship and Steel by Cole Chisel, two great rock truckie songs.
Yes.
So can I put it out there to Music Man Jono that he does another one for us in the style of Cole Chisel and Jimmy Barnes?
Absolutely, mate. I've been trying to find that solution for 20 years. I haven't found it yet. We need to get a song to the public. And like Tony said, not everybody's a country music fan. They want to see their dog live and their girlfriend come back or go away or something. So, mate, if we could get to the rest of the mainstream people, that'd be good.
Yeah, the yellow dog. It's a yellow Labrador.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always Lucille that's going to leave. Listen, shall we jump into hot topics? Rod, I wanted to run this past you. Transport for New South Wales has announced changes to speed limits for some PBS vehicles travelling under permit through the New South Wales road network. Since July 1, PBS vehicles over 26 metres long operating under an access permit won't be limited to 90 k's anymore for the state's road network. Your thoughts?
And, mate, this is something that we've been discussing for a long time now. I've spoken to Transport for New South Wales. I've asked them about a 100-kilometre-an-hour speed limit for Type 1 road trains. And most of your listeners will see what we are talking about as a road train. Now, if it's 26 metres, if it's up to 30 metres, it will have a long vehicle sign on. Anything over 30 metres becomes a road train. And everybody knew back in the day what a road train was. It was a truck towing a trailer with a converter dolly and another trailer, and that was up to 36 metres. We now have what's called an A-double. It looks like a road train, it drives like a road train, but it has additional technology. It has EBS on the brakes, it has rollover controls and all of those things. And that's why they are saying these vehicles are much safer than an old truck. It has all the technology and they're allowing it to 100. The trouble is, Luke, we have different rules in different states. We won't go too much down that path, but Queensland has allowed B triples to do 100. I've certainly spoken to Transport for New South Wales and they think that they will be able to get B triples across the line as well. So if you've got a modular one with all that technology, that's a good thing. But at the moment, you've got what is looking like a road train from the old days doing 90, and then you've got what's looking like a road train from the new days now able to do 100, and that creates for us traffic friction.
Yep.
Where the bloke who's doing 90 wants to be passed by the other bloke doing 100, and if we had 4 lanes across everywhere, that'd be good. So, mate, it's a step forward, but we need a few more steps, and I will be badgering, asking, emailing, ringing, and jumping up and down until we get a fair go.
I bet you will. Look, one more thing. What's the go with the union problems with Aldi? There were hundreds of union workers that were protesting nationally, the Aldi stores and their distribution centres, their DCs, in response to what they say are dangerous practices in the supermarket's transport supply chain. What happened here, Rod?
Well, mate, Aldi operate like Coles and Woolies. They operate DCs, distribution centres. Yep. Now, they have a majority of their own fleet, and you'll see the truck going down the road with Aldi on the side of the trailer. They employ a lot of drivers. There has been an argument from the union that where those drivers have raised safety concerns in the past, that Aldi has fobbed them off, pushed them aside. We know that the union would like to think that it can get into those sites and represent those drivers. I think they've struggled to do that with Aldi. Of course, the discussion, if you go back to Dick, talking about, how they are German-owned, isn't it?
Yeah, and all the profits go overseas.
Yep, we get nothing out of it. And people buy their stuff cheaper and don't think beyond where that money goes and who they're supporting and whether they're Australian jobs and manufacturing and those sorts of things. So sometimes it's just looking at the sense, mate. And again, there have been drivers where they've reported things. Aldi has refused to act. They've then gone to the union, and they're still seeking to get, the drivers heard and the safety improved in their supply chain.
I got another idea. Tony, you with me? You've probably discovered I'm an ideas man. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Hit me.
You know how I said the Oz-only aisle in Woolies and Coles?
Yes.
They should come up with their own version of aisle 3, because my missus goes to Aldi for that bloody aisle 3. She came back with this big grill that sits on top of our stove, and she said, how did they know I wanted one of these? I didn't know I wanted one. Anyway, and the camping chairs and the eskies, right. So we have an Oz aisle 3, where all those little incidental gadgets that you didn't know you needed, that you really did want, and they have the Oz aisle 3. You with me?
I'm with you.
Yeah, one end, mate. You have all the products in one bit, and then you have the Oz aisle 3 at the end, so you get the best of both worlds.
No, I'm going further. A whole warehouse, and it's just called aisle 3.
Well, that's like going to Bunnings, isn't it?
Okay, but everything's Australian, and it's the Oz aisle 3.
Well, Mark, when we see the first of your stores open, Luke, we'll be sure to come along and buy things.
There's 2 customers. Volvo have rolled out the first Australian-made electric truck. In fact, the Prime Minister got involved. He joined Volvo Group Australia at its home base this week to witness, like cutting the ribbon, of the first Australian-made electric truck that rolled off the production line. What do you make of this?
Mate, Volvo have a big factory at Wacol in Brisbane. They have had for many years. Yep. I've actually been in there many years ago. And, of course, Volvo are now Mack as well. Volvo is a Swedish company, and many years ago when I won the Driver of the Year award, I went to Volvo in Sweden to have a look around over there. So, mate, it's a big step forward. Volvo do a lot of CKD, though. A lot of the stuff is built overseas. Their engines, their transmissions, their cabs, they're all built overseas. And yes, they are delivered to Australia and they are put together in Australia. Whereas Kenworth manufactures the trucks from nuts and bolts and bits of steel to start with, and the majority of the Volvo stuff comes from overseas. Now, of course, that means they're a worldwide company. They've got a platform. They've got electric trucks in virtually every country around the world. They have a big presence in the American market with the bonneted trucks that we don't see here. Mack sort of has that market in Australia. They've got the Superliner and things. So, look, it's good to see them stepping forward. We know that back in the day, Volvo cars were the first one to have the reflective stripes and daytime running lights and other things like that. their trucks are renowned for the safety of the driver. In the event of an accident, and I don't know whether you've ever seen it, Luke, they did videos years ago. So they had the crash test dummy, Bjorn, of course, and they did this big video where they showed the truck rolling down the hill, and Bjorn didn't have his seatbelt on, and the other bloke did, and the bloke with the seatbelt survived, and Bjorn got thrown out the windscreen and rolled over by the truck, so he didn't survive. So, look, it is another thing about safety in trucks. We want to see the drivers survive. Most of the time it's not the truck driver's fault. So the fact that they've gone down this path, we know that there is a role for them maybe in local distribution and the things. It's good to see that Australia's taking part in it. And, of course, the other side of it is that Lindsay's going to do well and he's going to have all these trucks out there to trial. The charging thing is the biggest. I did see something the other day, mate, where a farmer, if he goes and gets his electric tractor and he uses it for a day, it takes him 5 days to charge it in. So there's a little bit more work to be done yet.
There is indeed. But there you go. So, it's Volvo Wacol, but most of these trucks, the components, everything made overseas and brought in. I tell you what, publicising that as the Australian electric truck, it's Ben Chifley who unveiled the FX Holden November 29, 1948, be having a heart attack.
Yes, I think he would. And look, we've seen so many things, Luke, and you're going to have to make a distinction in your Aussie aisle because there are so many things. Even Bond's singlets now, which we can't get here, have on a thing designed in Australia, and then in smaller print, made in China.
No. The Oz aisle, manufactured, grown, and owned by Australians.
Absolutely.
That's what's in my Oz aisle and my Oz aisle 3.
Yes, and we hope people support that and they don't find a way to go around it and say that it was made here when it wasn't. So, yes.
A great example of that was orange juice. They used to bring in the oranges from Brazil and put water in the concentrate here and called it a produce
Aussie water.
and call it produce of Australia.
Yes.
Anyway, listen, the Casino Truck Show is coming up. We're looking forward to it. Tony, are you going to be there or not?
I will not, unfortunately. I'm going to be on the other side of the world. I'm going to be in the United States supporting our business for some local events over there. So I'll miss the Casino Truck Show this year, unfortunately.
Well, I want a note. We want a note signed by your mum that excuses you from the Casino Truck Show.
Yes, the absentee note.
That's it.
But we will take a radio in its place, of course. If there's something like that where you might supply a radio that we can put up for the auction or something like that. Seeing you're not going to be able to be there, Tony, let's put you on the spot.
Never one to miss an opportunity, Rod. Well done, mate. I'm sure we can arrange that.
Or as Bob Hudson once said, don't you ever let a chance go by. That's right.
I've got that album.
The Newcastle Song album.
Yes, absolutely.
It had a grey cover and it was on M7 Records. How am I going?
Jonathan Livingston Budgerigar, the X-rated song. Yes, I've got the album, mate. Still listen to it occasionally. There's not much like it, is it? We'll have to get Jonathan onto something like that. That'd be different.
Anyway, up in Newcastle, they've got very strange mating habits. All the young girls of Newcastle walk down the main street, Hunter Street, the name will become obvious later on in the song, and all the young guys used to sit in the front seat of the hot FJ with chrome-painted grease nipples and double reverse overhead twin-cam foxtails and lean out the window and say real cool, suave things to the girls on the footpath, like, g'day. How you going? Will you do it? Anyway, Bob Hudson. I may have heard it once or twice, Rod. And of course, the coolest to sit near the window was young Normie. Anyway,
young Norman, and you got the version on the album where they did her name was not, and we couldn't say it because we'd be sued for legal reasons.
That's right. And you always wanted to play at an album where Judy Bailey played Ratchet.
Yeah.
She was a jazz pianist who was one of the musicians of the band, and she played a percussion instrument, which was called a ratchet. Okay, Tony, this will all be edited out. You watch. Kelsey won't leave this dribble in. But that's what, Tony, that's what we do here on Truckie Tuesday. We try and have a bit of fun, but the important thing is, as I said earlier, reinforce the sense of community and safety.
And I think what you're doing here is so good. It's
unique.
It is unique, but also, I'm preaching to the choir here, but as we see that shift in terms of the reduction in the number of owner operators and we've got larger corporate fleets taking over, I think in some respects even in the last 10 years, I've seen a little bit of a decline in that sense of community within the trucking industry. And I'd love to see that start to really build itself back up. And Rod talked about it before with the casino truck show, the effort that people go, the pride that they show in their rigs, the countless hours spent polishing all the stainless and the chrome. I love all of that. And the community around trucking and the pride in the work and the vehicles, I think is something that personally I think we need more of. And if we can do anything to foster that, and shows like yours, if GME can get behind it and help you to make more of these shows to support the industry, then we'll absolutely do so.
Well, I couldn't be prouder to have a sponsor. I could not be prouder than to have a sponsor like GME. Tony Crook, thank you so much. Rod Hannifey, I'll let you get back on the highway in the Kenworth. Shall we finish with Jono's Casino song again? Can we just do that? It's called
Absolutely.
She's Gotta Look Right. Let's finish with this again. It's not Jimmy Barnes, but you know what? Thanks to AI, next song, it just might sound very close. Thank you so much for listening. We love you all. As Don Lane would say, we love your faces. So send us photos, send us emails, send us voice messages, and we'll see you at the Casino Truck Show soon on the 31st of July. We'll be there for 3 days, I think.
We sure will be. And Luke, what is your thought of the day?
I'm borrowing this one, but it's a goodie. Kelsey, don't take life too seriously. You never get out of it alive.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Goodbye.
Goodbye, bro.
Casino. She's gotta look right when we roll in, wash her down and make that chrome grand sheds lit up in the radio